Thank you. All right, we will start our evening with Manager Parsons' comments.
Thank you, Mayor Clement, members of council, those present and watching with the online streaming. Welcome to the March work session of the Town Council of Southern Pines. For your agenda today, we've got a number of presentations to include an update on the housing supply project from your planning office. We're going to talk a little bit about the fiscal year 25-26 budget, which of course will be in retreat on next week. We'll lead into that with some revenue forecast and discussion regarding the solid waste fees in the coming year. Item C is just a general discussion amongst the council regarding your council appointments. That can be as brief as you choose to make it, but there was some discussion back in December when you made appointments of revisiting some items in March, so we've simply placed it on the agenda for that opportunity. And then finally, BJ will provide you with your monthly update from the planning department. We do have 5 items that we'll be asking for some action on, or 4 items, I'm sorry, that we'll be asking for some action on this afternoon, including an appointment to the Appearance Commission, 1 2-year Historic District Commission. We have 2 budget ordinances to present to you, and then finally, the Finance Office has been doing quite a bit of work on looking at requests for proposals for audit firms, and we have a recommendation this afternoon for the selection of an audit firm for your fiscal year 25 audit, which is the one that will be occurring in the fall once we close the books June 30th on the current fiscal year. We'll then move into council roundtable, and then I have a requested closed session to end the meeting. I will state on the front end that following that closed session, the stream will end as council enters into that closed session. There will be no request for action in open session once we return from the closed session, so we will not be restarting any streams or anything, and the minutes will simply show basically coming out of the closed session and then adjourning the meeting later this afternoon. With that, I'm happy to take any questions or simply turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Okay. All right, moving on to council updates and discussion. We have our planning staff here to update us on the housing supply project.
They're leaving.
Don't leave us yet. Okay. Oh, nice. Good afternoon, Elena.
Good afternoon, Town Council. Great to see you. Manager Parsons and Assistant Town Managers as well. Mac, welcome back. Great to be with you. I'm here because back in December of just a couple months ago, you guys had asked us to look over, or you guys had approved a list of comprehensive plan implementation projects for phase 2. And so one of those, if you guys remember this handy dandy little sheet that BJ put together for you, listing out what those projects were. So one of them was expand housing options, and the tasks that you had given us were to implement policy 7.1, which is promoting diversity of housing. And so that's what we're talking about: diversity of housing types, diversity of housing costs, sizes, things like that. The second policy you had tasked us with was encouraging more workforce housing. And that's looking at the Tri-Cities area. And then lastly, to study the short-term rental topic. And so we took that charge from you, and move on to our next slide. And so I'm here before you because I'm acting as our project manager for this project, alongside my colleagues James Broadwell and Mason Maddox. And I thought, what an appropriate person to have working in a team working in this, because I myself am an owner of a Habitat house, which was originally created as an affordable housing unit. And me and my team are members of the local workforce who could benefit from expanded housing options, right? And other members, obviously, of our organization as well, and beyond. So what have we done so far? That's essentially what I'm here to tell you guys. What have we done since you tasked us with this project back in December? So since then, we've been having conversations, high-level conversations with regional and state leaders on the housing topic. and getting some feedback from them. And we've also, probably most noteworthy, convened an ad hoc group, focus group, some of which are here tonight. I want to point them out here in a second. And that ad hoc focus group includes home builders, it includes realtors, it includes design professionals, economic development organizations, representative from a local bank, and our representative from our local housing trust. And so we've had really rich conversations about housing, and I have to say I really admire not only the work that they do, but the time that they've committed to talking to us about this. And so I kind of want to take a moment, because there's some of them in the audience, so I want to just shout out to them. So we've got Kelly Adams, and she is with Everything Pines Partners, and also a member of the let's see here, the Mid Carolina Regional Association of Realtors. Thank you, MCREA. And we've also got Colin Webster with Ascot here with us today, and we've got Seth Mavis, who is part of the Moore County Home Builders Association, the president of that organization, as well as a builder with Mavis Farm and General Contracting. So very active in our community, very engaged, and we're really lucky that you guys have been a part of this process. I also want to just list the other people in the group, just because they've dedicated time to this effort, and it's worth mentioning them. We've got Amy Fraley and Farah Newman of Habitat for the community of the NC Sandhills. We've got Ryan Pascal with Pineland Homes and Remodeling LLC. Bob Coons with Kuntz Jones Design. We've got Sandra Barnhart with Mid Carolina Regional Association of Realtors as well. Natalie Hawkins from the Moore County Economic Development Partnership. Sandra Dales and Dion Albergs from the Southern Pines Land and Housing Trust. Andrew Lyons from First Bank. Travis Green from Legacy Home Construction. And Samantha Cole from Coldwell Banker Managed. So really grateful and really thought it was important to recognize the work that they've done and the time they dedicated to speaking with us. And in addition to this focus group, I also want to recognize BJ, as well as Mike and Assistant Town Managers Mike and Jessica and Reagan. I'm gonna make sure I'm not missing anybody. We've got James Mickle as well, and Gerald Ostland, who's been a part of the conversation. So we've had staff members involved in it as well, not just your three planning team tackling it. It's been an effort to get everyone together and have these conversations. We really appreciate and are grateful for their time. And talking about housing barriers and what not only are the barriers, but what are our opportunities? What can we do to push ahead and tackle diversity in housing and workforce housing? And so that was what was in your memo. So the memo included essentially a summary of everything, all of those conversations that we've been having with all these folks, and also had some attachments of some analysis that we've done, as well as summaries of conversations we've been having with the focus group, and a letter from Habitat. And so why are we here now? Why is the planning staff coming to you now instead of at the end with a package of amendments for you to consider at that time? And it's really two requests that are coming from this point in time why we're here before you. And the first is we were asked by the task force, the working group, to set up some pathways for the town council to consider. And one, any or all of them, planning is capable and willing and believe that all 5 are appropriate pathways forward to address housing diversity and workforce housing. We're just need some marching orders to decide which of these paths, if all or if any, we're going to tackle and start chugging away at them. So it's really the main ask there is, what do you want to prioritize this year? The second request that we have from you is your consideration and maybe approval of the goals that we have proposed for the project. Feel free to modify and edit as well, any of them. That's it. The press is up for discussion. You have EJ and I here, and we've got members of the focus group here, so feel free to ask us any questions you may have. EJ, want to come here?
Oh, good, thank you.
All right, council, you have questions?
Did the focus group
give any thought to what an enforcement mechanism would look like? Say someone came in following, say, pathway one, which is, or maybe that's not, maybe pathway one's not the right one. Streamline processes and then pre-approved entitlement. So what would that look like long-term for if someone comes and takes advantage of the system or one of these pathways? How would the town ensure that whoever's developing this lives up to the program? I mean, that might be too detailed at this point in time, but did you guys give any thought to that?
We're happy to dig into the details a little bit and some of the nitty gritty of the conversations. I think it's important for you guys to decide what you're trying to prioritize. I will say that any of these pathways that you choose, we will be diving deep in questions like that. So for instance, in this one, there's been the pathway one with more duplexes, townhomes, and quadplexes. The idea is looking at our ordinance, what are lot dimensions that might be hindering people's uptake of more of that missing middle option. Pre-approved might look, into pathway 3, different types of layouts that we think are appropriate and could be something that the council reviews prior and kind of approves a stamped out option. And if so, as long as people meet that criteria, then they could, have that fast-tracked option. But of course, all of these things and all of the nitty-gritty details of each of them and how they actually play out will be a part of the
So I
conversation.
didn't know if there was an example. I noticed in some of these situations, there was reference to other communities that have done certain things, and I just didn't know if there was any community that had enforcement mechanism might not be the right word, but to ensure that, if there's an expedited process or a pre-approved entitlement process or some type of fee reduction, that when they're going to do 10% of 20% or 30% of workforce type housing, that happens, and that how long does that happen?
Okay, I think I understand your question, and at the end, let me know if I don't. One of the bits of feedback that we have encountered and that our research has indicated is that anything that requires long-term administration by a housing administrator or a housing authority of some sort. So if you have a certain number of units that are guaranteed to be below market rate, this, that, and the other thing. None of those options are really on the table for us at this time.
Right.
And the reason for that is we're aware that long-term administration in the form of a new position, such as a housing administrator, such as a housing agency, et cetera, it's just not viable for our size of town and for our resources available.
So it's kind of a good faith approach then?
No. So it's not a good faith approach as much as it is as we don't, right now, the pathways that are in certain, they don't involve anything that would require long-term monitoring of a below market rate. In other words, all the pathways that are within our purview right now to do through regulatory reform. So I'll throw out as an example only, if you were to, in certain zones, reduce the minimum lot size so that you could possibly carve out a lot at the back of an existing lot that would otherwise have to remain at 20,000 square foot minimum lot size. Okay, so now what you've done is you've created the opportunity for someone with a certain amount of land to carve out something in the back and use an easement to get to that lot. So, but that's not something where you long-term monitor the price of the house back there. You just say, we're going to allow for more infill. We're going to allow for more density. We're going to allow for more building height. We're going to look at right now if it is difficult to go through a certain regulatory process that in certain areas we want to encourage, we'll look at in those areas making it an administrative review rather than a quasi-judicial or legislative review. Those options the hope is they will deliver more units that are less than $750,000 for a quarter of an acre lot with a detached single-family residential home of 2,800 square feet, and therefore the price point may come in lower. But none of the options at this point, other than the pathways that involve a housing action plan that involves a broader group, they just don't look at anything like a long-term necessity for administering it. So I think that's your question, right? Is like, so for a lot of jurisdictions, when they do housing issues, it involves land trusts and it involves things that have that long-term administrative and enforcement cost.
It answers my question in the sense that there would need to be, if I'm not talking about ADU specifically as much as I'm talking about density credits. and somebody says, I want to build, I'm allowed to build 20 units, I want to build 25 units, and those additional 5 units, I want to meet one of these criterias. And what does the town hold that those 5 units actually ferret out that way?
Okay, I'm not aware of anything the town is contemplating at this time that would require the long-term administration and the administrative cost and resources of
I think
some type of a concurrency zoning or something like that.
I think you kind of answered it with the housing agency or stuff like that, but I just didn't know if anything surfaced in research, what was successful in other communities.
Yeah, the communities that have success in setting goals and getting closer to those goals, usually there is a housing option stack, and you look at different AMI percentages, and you say, in this 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 100, 80 to 120, things like that, here's what we can do. And we are really right now focused on the 80 to 120,
Yeah.
and we're trying to set a goal. Is it still 30? Was it still 30 units?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the goal would be 30 units. Why 30 units? Well, because it's something, it's not nothing, and because by experimenting to see if it's within our purview to use market rate mechanisms through regulatory reform to deliver 30 units at the first crack at the 80 to 120 of AMI at a certain price point, to see if we can do that through density, to see if we can do that through regulatory reform. If we can't if Craig can't give it 1, well, then we reevaluate after a year and say, what did we learn? And if we can get 20, we can't get 30, we can say why. And so something's better than nothing, because the challenge that we encounter is that a lot of jurisdictions, it's easy to say, well, we can't solve this ourselves, because you can't. And we can't provide all the housing for the whole region ourselves, because you can't. So it's really easy to just say, we can't. And we don't want to have a housing agency because it's expensive, and we don't want to do this. And so I guess we'll do nothing. And that we just didn't think that was an acceptable answer. So what can we do?
Right, and so that follows up actually when you brought up the regional thing. My next question, this was discussed at Tri-Cities?
No, not at Tri-Cities today.
Didn't you mention there was a discussion amongst other communities, or needed to be a discussion amongst other communities? What was that comment about?
Sure. So Pathway 5, I think, is maybe what you're talking about, and it's whether or not we want to be spearheading a regional or even local housing action plan.
Okay, so this hasn't been discussed outside of this focus group.
It's been talked as an option.
You may be thinking, and I think it's referenced in your memo, but you may be thinking about the housing study that Boeing National Research did that was done through a cooperative effort of Moore County Economic Development, the Chamber of Commerce, and one of the regional realtors groups. And I think it was yours. Yeah, so and that was presented at a recent More 100 meeting, and I think Elena references that,
Okay.
and that may be what you're thinking of with
Maybe,
that.
yeah, I think so. This is a lot of good information, and I appreciate the work that everyone put into it. I do think, though, that it is probably something that we, along with other communities, try to tackle as a group.
Yeah, I can add just as points of reference. We did reach out to Aberdeen and Pinehurst, and Aberdeen said they were dealing with some other priorities or focusing on other priorities right now and wasn't going to engage immediately. But I do think a steering committee that includes leadership from each community and planners from each community
Yeah.
is something that's essential to success for Pathway 5. And it would mean everyone playing ball.
Thank you for all this and your work on this. It's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to have done it.
Just, I guess, a Pathway 5, that action plan that you look to assemble a coalition of interest to talk about it. Those are some of your some of the tools that come up. You say, listen, we can't do that without talking with the county and talking with other cities nearby us. That's Pathway 5. There's other things that come up, like I gave some examples of, where you say, well, gosh, if the political will existed to do it and the public will existed to do it, we could probably make that change to the UDO with nothing but a text amendment, and that might make it that much less harder, that much less difficult to bring that type of unit. And I could continue with examples, but I won't. The point is, there's a number of things that go into that bucket where you say, well, I could think of about 5 or 6 text amendments that if you did those, we've heard from the focus group, I think Andrew Lyons said it best, when the idea was pitched, he said, well, it wouldn't hurt You know, in other words, like it may not, he's not going to sit there and say, oh, that solved the problem, but say, well, that wouldn't hurt because some of the obstacles are just the amount of process. Hey, we're saying we want housing. Okay, well, builders will come in and try to deliver housing. And yet when Colin and I talk about some of the mechanics of actually going through the plating process and the final plating process, there are points in that process that I, as planning director, see something happening and go, man, we're sitting here saying we want housing over here, but we've got this process that's pretty clunky over here, but it requires a bunch of text amendments, and there will be some people that don't care for some of those specific things. We could do that unilaterally, but I think that's where this check-in, the main purpose of this check-in is to come before you and say, with the memo, and to say some of these things, there may be pushback from members of the community who just don't want certain change when it comes to density, or they don't want certain change when it comes to the regulatory process for delivering subdivisions. And so if we want to be serious about looking at some of those options and delivering them to you as text amendments, we just want to check in with you and let you know what's going on at this point.
One final question. On pathway 2, ADUs, accessory dwelling units, are currently allowed. But we don't get much success with that, do we?
No, not to,
Yeah, and we've heard feedback from the group, as again, it's a great focus group. You have a lot of different interests, and some of it is, for example, as simple as, sure, you can do an ADU, but in order to make it work, the setbacks kind of kill it.
Right.
Because, so something as simple as setbacks. Oh gosh, we could look at the UDO and just say for ADUs, we reduce the setbacks by a certain amount. You know, if you're delivering an accessory dwelling unit. The number of accessory dwelling units, we got feedback that, hey, some people would do them, but they want to do more than one. They might want to do 2 or 3 accessory dwelling units. You say, okay, well, we can take a look at that. That's something under the purview of zoning. You know, so the ideas that come out about why people don't do ADUs, that's certainly,
Could be one of them, but do you even get interest? Like people asking questions, do you get much interest in
from
ADUs?
time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do get, if I'm going to ballpark a figure, once a month, we get an inquiry about doing an ADU.
That's
Yeah.
significant.
Yeah.
I think.
And again, not short-term rental. ADUs are not short-term rentals. ADUs are for long-term rental.
Yeah. Thank you.
I was also going to add that to your previous point and question, small developers, a lot of the conversations we've been having with the focus group is that small developers might also be a part of, you know, the solution or part of, you know, addressing the issue. And working through any, like, especially the regulatory pathways, there might be opportunities in there as well as the non-regulatory pathways to help bring small developers into the fold and getting a little bit more development going, that infill happening that way. One of the goals for sure.
I had a question, or sorry, you were going to answer. Please. So all of these are great ideas, but I guess nothing addresses just free market. I mean, we're very desirable. So if we make it super easy, a small developer comes in, it's a lot easier for them, but yet they still are going to sell their 5 row homes for $700,000 each because there's 5 people out there who want to pay $700,000 for that home. That'll happen. Like none of this addresses the cost that our desirable free market has created.
Yes, Councilman Pate, and I appreciate you bringing that up. There is a tipping point that most jurisdictions get to where the simple fact of supply and demand is why many jurisdictions eventually create a housing agency of some sort, a housing authority, a housing something or other, because they get to a point where some resource, whether it's grants, whether it's local, whether it's state, whatever it is, some resource is applied to the housing issue. And once it is, and once you begin to tinker with the cost, and you need to keep it permanently affordable at below a certain amount, you have to monitor that, you have to enforce it. So far, none of the scenarios we're talking about, because we're aware that that scenario comes with added cost and comes with added staffing and comes with added grant administration and you name it, that point, when those things come up, we say, listen, our number one goal right now is how do we attempt, and I say attempt because there's no guarantees, how do we attempt to just make it so that a housing product that can be sold for a certain price point, the market will deliver it at that price point. Maybe it's because it's smaller, maybe it's because there's more of them, maybe it's because they go vertical, maybe it's because, you know, can we do it? And if it turns out that the market dictates that, yeah, we go way higher density, but they're so nice and they're so cool and they're so beautiful and they're so Southern Pinesy that they still go for $600,000, well, then we will have failed to achieve that AMI goal, and now we reevaluate.
What is that, the acronym, AMI? What is that?
Area median income.
Area,
median income.
okay.
Which is in the value of that is in the goals, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ms. Grady, did questions?
I'm just curious, you have a very diverse group for this focus group. This was well put together. I don't know how you decided on the folks, but this was good. So I'm curious, as you all spoke and talked and shared, was there a particular pathway that maybe the focus group thought the town should maybe push first in trying to do this?
That's a very good question. I can't say that there were I mean, we can ask them to respond, but I think there was a general consensus that all of them would lead us closer to diverse housing and to workforce housing. We probably have spent the majority of our meetings talking about the regulatory reforms and those pathways. But it always comes back to that there's something a little bit beyond what Southern Pines can unilaterally do that needs to be done, which is why those regulatory pathways are in there and need to be hashed out a lot more. And you know.
I frequently, when it comes to this and all the conversations we've had, I frequently think of the story of the guy walking along on the beach, littered with starfish. And he's picking up one every once in a while and throwing it back into the ocean. And the person he's walking with says, "There's so many, why are you doing that? It doesn't matter." And he picks up another one and he says, "It mattered to that one." And that story I think of frequently because I just think of the housing issue crosses jurisdictional boundaries. You know, people live an hour, half hour away, 45 minutes away, and they buy houses a half hour, 40, but they work here. And it's just, but once again, it comes back to, it's better to try doing something and look at our regulations and look at what is in place that is clunky and an impediment to achieving what we want. And there are low-hanging fruit, there's high-hanging fruit, there's everything in between. So.
Ms. Peterson, you have questions?
So does, well, a number of things. Number one, I think Aberdeen has a great handle on with the Habitat for Humanity undertaking on the 100 acres in Aberdeen is going to be amazing. I'm interested in whether or not the people who normally benefit from a Habitat home qualify under AMI standard, or are they lower than AMI?
Yeah, that's in our memo. They
Yeah,
are
sorry.
between 30 and 80% is
Right.
what they aim for. Affordable. These numbers actually came from Farah in our last meeting. She said,
Right.
30 to 80 is what they have in their criteria for granting mortgages to families and selecting families. But the workforce, that's the 80 to 120.
Right. Okay. So it's a void. It's a 80 to 120 is a void. And then I to Mr. Pate's point, which I agree with, and I share his. It's not very nice to say that skepticism, but I share his concern that if you address ADU and you remove setbacks, I would love to think that there was a sense of altruism that would take it and run with that, but there's not. There's not. So I've lived long enough to know there's not. And I think too, Mr. Greaves, that when you originally said it is the quote hope that we will deliver more units, I think hope is the guiding light in that case, and I'm not sure that hope is going to save the day. So I'm skeptical about that. And I also have given a lot of thought to and kind of studied what was going on in Durham, and I get it. I think you and I, BJ, have talked about this, that the Durham situation is that there are a certain number of units that are offered as affordable housing, but then you literally have to get the town with an employee who oversees that, and the town literally becomes involved in real estate, which is not our job. And I get all that. I get that this is a huge problem, and I see all the issues. And I don't think that and the reason I asked the Habitat question is I don't think that the Habitat guidelines allow for us to address the workforce issue head on, because I think their guideline is lower. So there really is this horrible, horrible void there for the 80 to 120%. So I've asked a question that I kind of knew the answer to, but I wanted to put that out there and just try to tackle everything. The thing that really concerns me is if we make changes to the ADU or to any number of changes that are addressed in the packet as far as pathways, then if there's no limited rate, there's also no consequence. The town has no teeth in the undertaking. There's
I-
nothing, right?
But I don't think that we need to have teeth in this. We're not creating a situation where someone's punished for doing what we're asking them to do. We are asking them to provide missing middle housing. We are standing by our commitment to do that by lowering the regulation to do so. And in order for that to solve the problem, we have to allow them to be built. There's not a teeth that gets put into that scenario. We're not giving them favors.
I appreciate your input. My question, I think, is that, I understand what the reality is. My question is, has there been a successful ADU employment in another jurisdiction that does not have the capacity to have a real estate division put in place like Durham? Has there been a successful way to have a consequence based on the way that the zoning stipulation is written, so that the expectation is clear? I'm not sure I understood my question, so if you did, congratulations, that's great.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think I'm gonna reframe it a little bit.
Okay, great. We'll all appreciate that, most especially me.
The question, the genesis can be as simple as, okay, if Habitat is out there helping people get houses that and their income is in the 30 to 80% of the
Right.
median income.
Right.
And we consider the workforce housing, planners, firefighters, police officers, et cetera, to be the workforce, right? And you say to yourself, okay, a person making 80 to 120% of median income, area median income,
Right.
can afford a home of between $230,000 and $340,000. Okay, so then logically, you say to not be cost burdened by the price of that home. So then you say to yourself, all right, let's just pick the middle, $300,000. You go to the focus group. You say, why can't you provide something that somebody can buy and build some equity as a starter home for $300,000 in our jurisdiction? Go. And they say, well, let's start with the cost of land. Land in your jurisdiction is incredibly expensive. All right, well, we can't subsidize that. We can't deal with it.
Right.
Next issue is the cost, the regulatory costs. And those aren't just permit fees. There's a whole host of things that go into that about meeting engineering standards and the design, and the engineers going back and forth with them and chewing through money and okay, those are costs. Those are real. And the higher standards you have for development, the nicer you need it to be. The more expensive, what's called a street cross-section. Your
Sure.
street cross-section, has
Sure. Yeah.
different jurisdictions have different requirements. Okay, meeting all that costs a fair bit. Now, if your zoning, let's say, allows for 4 units per acre, and you have to cover the cost of the land, the cost of the street, the cost of the sewer and water pipes, and the only thing you're gonna be able to sell is 4 units for every acre you develop. You're gonna have to sell those 4 units for a lot of money. Now, you haven't even gotten yet to the price of materials, the price of labor, the price of financing, the price of all those things. The focus group has been generous in sharing with us their obstacles. So we can take this list and we can say, well, we can't do anything about that, can't do anything about that, can't do anything about that. Okay, and there's a lot of things on the list. Now, there's a handful of things on that list that we can do something about. And what can we do about it? Well, if we allow some more density, if we, for certain products, lower development standards for certain products in certain places, the cost per linear foot of doing a street cross-section that is, for example, a full municipal street cross-section in certain areas that we want housing, and quite frankly, that street cross-section might be overbuilt anyways. So if we can reduce that street cross-section and get rid of certain things and make it so that the ability to do that street cross-section is more affordable, that's a major cost that goes in. Now, between density and between those standards, if that's within our control, and if we can hit a sweet spot of tinkering with those requirements in the right place for the right product. So you deliver to us attached townhomes where I can own the footprint of the townhome, and you can deliver at a certain price point that sure enough, you can bring in ownership for entry-level homes at $279,000 or $308. And you can do that, and that's the market point for that. Now, by the time it hits the market, it might be a higher price. We're not going to control that. But that's better than bringing in subdivisions that deliver, by definition, a $700,000 house starting because of the cost of land and because of the street cross section. So better being, are there certain places in town where the sewer and the water pipes already exist, but there are impediments to doing this today that are just because of clunkiness? I'll give you a small example, is you bring in a conditional zoning district to deliver a really neat townhome development, and yet you have to go through, in addition to going through the rezoning, you also have to go through a quasi-judicial process for a major subdivision preliminary plat, and you have to meet all these standards. So, yes. So we're aware of instances where we could probably help with the issue. Conclusion, all we can do is try to help with it. We can't control the price of land to start with because the market decides that. We can't ultimately control the price that it will sell for, because if you're too successful at what you do and you deliver a really, really cool product, people will come along and be like, I want it, and supply and demand. So
All those fixes too that BJ just mentioned, we are envisioned to be incentive-based, so that people would still have a base option to go through kind of the more rigorous route. But if they choose one of our pre-reviewed pathways or we'll say fast-tracked options, then they kind of skip a lot of that because we've already reviewed it ahead of time and thought that the layout and the design and the things were all, Southern Pines-y.
So do you think that the most hopeful approach is one that, well, do either of you have a personal opinion about what the most hopeful approach would be? And I'm assuming that the math that goes into the AMI and the 30 to 80% that Habitat does and the 80 to 120% that you're talking about addressing as far as the workforce goes is based on no more than 1/3 of the monthly income that would go toward the mortgage is what I'm assuming the magic is there. Is that right? Am I right, or am I?
Calculations in attachment 1.
Right.
Exactly. It's a little bit more nuanced than just 30%.
Right, but it's around 30%. So do you have an insight on something that you think might incentivize a change? Are you waiting for us to tell you what we think? But I'd love to hear from you if you have an opinion.
the conversation we're having right now and the awareness that council has already gained from this conversation is key. I'll go out on a limb here and say, I think of it on a regular basis because of the work that Elena and the team is doing and the feedback we've gotten from the focus group, and what I think about in the position I'm in is, okay, there's a whole bunch we can't do, but there's a few things we can do. You know what the sweet spot is? It's probably going to be a package of text amendments where we look at a few modest regulatory reforms that may be controversial to some in some neighborhoods, because it may mean that somebody can build a house now next to my property, but it's going to be a little bit closer to my property line, as an example. Or somebody before, where you could only do detached single-family residential, you can now do duplex, triplex, quadplex, and et cetera. But possibly try to do some mitigation of the design element. So as just a make-it-up example, you get a fourplex in there, but you do need to buffer, and you do need to provide this, that, and the other thing. Fine, you're softening the blow, if you will. That's probably something along those lines. And consistent with what states have been doing, consistent with what other jurisdictions have been doing in some of the regulatory reform by eliminating detached single-family only zoning. That's a trend, and it seems to be working in many jurisdictions. That'd be sort of a package. And then that same package would probably have something along the lines of, in the state of North Carolina, subdivision regulations, local jurisdictions can have them. After that, the statutes are pretty open about what you can do with your subdivision regulations. We, in our jurisdiction, have a carve-out for minor subdivisions, 5 lots or less that meet certain criteria. You can get it approved administratively. We could have another type of subdivision that, say, for example would be 10 townhome units in a certain circumstance, designed a certain way, qualify for administrative review. Now, you qualify for administrative review, you don't have to go through the major subdivision review process, but only in a certain circumstance. It's exactly what we do right now with all minor subdivisions. 5 lots or less, in certain circumstances, you qualify for administrative review. 10 townhome lots or less, in certain circumstances, with certain design elements, you qualify for administrative review. That's your pre-approved type of thing. And you take those two packages and you deliver them, and it's nothing earth-shattering. It has the potential to have elements of it that are slightly controversial, depending upon what you live next, the land you live next to, or what zoning you live next to. But overall, you look at it and you say, that probably would help. That probably would make it a little bit easier to deliver a certain price point that we are lacking.
So I think I hear you, and I think your assertion is a set of UDO modifications coupled with the promise of an administrative review might, hopefully, to use your word, might spark what we're trying to achieve here. And
That is one of the pathways that's in the memo, because, for example, other things that are worthy of talking about that might go towards an action plan, or other things about accessory dwelling units and the ability to do them, a few other things in the other pathways, those are different pathways.
Right.
But the one we have most control over is looking at what is the clunkiness in the UDO right now, and what is the opportunity within some of our historically single-family only zones, where we actually have a fair bit of sewer pipes, water pipes, streets, and a lot of infrastructure that's already in place that we could put more density there and probably still maintain a really cool character. Because we've got places since our last comp plan that prioritized infill, that there were many, many policy changes that occurred between 2010 and 2013 that have then led to the last 10 years of infill development. And some of our coolest area towns are those areas where that infill has occurred. And people dig it, and they like those areas, and those property values are still very desirable, and it hasn't destroyed anything. So continued infill. Now, again, to your point,
Right.
I'm not saying, if we do this, it'll solve.
It's a carrot, and the carrot may be abused. I get it.
Yeah.
Do you think that is preferential? Would you prefer to see that rather than a UDO revision packet coupled with a conditional zoning stipulation that would then give some review and conditions by the council, some review by and conditions by the council?
Great question.
I think there's a risk there of if it comes back to
Well,
council.
I'm sorry.
That's
Can I get an
okay.
answer to my question? please?
Absolutely, and then I
Thank
will
you.
add to the answer.
Great.
Excellent question. I think there's always going to be a place for conditional zoning districts to get good design in certain, because I don't believe this text amendment will be something where suddenly carte blanche, you just, put up skyscraper, you put up, apartment complexes. That's not at all what we're
Right.
talking about. What we're talking about is,
Right.
so there will always be a place for, if you were to say townhomes, you would, as an example of a pre-approved subdivision, there might be zones where that would be by right, but there's going to be other zones in order to get that density, you're going to have to do a conditional zoning district. It's just right now, you have to do the conditional zoning district, and you also have to go through major subdivision preliminary plat.
Right.
And that's a whole lot of process that's very unpredictable.
Process would be cumbersome in that case. Okay. And Elena, do you have any different opinion in that regard?
No, I agree. with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That helps. Thank you.
I think the cumbersome process is what I was going to say. What you're doing is you're putting it in front of council and worrying that there will be some people on the council who will, regardless of saying this is a goal, vote against the projects that are meeting our goals. And I think that that's what we're trying to avoid is creating more hurdles to the things that we need.
BJ, Mr. Grief, excuse me. How difficult would it be for you to put together this list of clunky, as you call it, so that we can kind of start to see what you're talking about? Like, hey, this is clunky. We could amend it to make it easier. Like, would that be difficult for you to sort of put that list together?
No, in fact, I think that would be the next step of the project is, that pathway would begin to assemble that, and we could, if the council wishes, we could bring back a list of examples. I think we can, I can almost rattle them off my head because we deal with them every day, but do it more formally and sort of say, these are the things that we've received additional feedback from the focus group that can be looked at, and yeah, that's very doable.
It would just be helpful, because I don't think any of us want to put at risk the character of the town but if you can point out, hey, here's ways that could be cleaner while not sacrificing character and other things, it'd be helpful to see.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. There's no panacea. Everything we have, we could bring back to you. Somebody will be affected by it. I mean, every clunky thing I can say, well, that's in there, and here's the thing. If you just swept that away, here's who might get upset about that. You know, I can point to text amendments we've tried in the past that some were passed, some were not, but someone was affected by it because that's the way these regulations work. We, and with the help of the focus group, really try to stay focused on that sweet spot where it's like, yes, we acknowledge that everything has the potential to be controversial. That's the way this stuff works. But, you know, where are the things that you can get the most bang for your buck with the least amount of controversy or an understanding of it? And sometimes you just won't. Some people just don't want something to change on the other side of the property line from them, period. Never will. And we can just decide, therefore we'll never do anything different.
So
That's a difficult decision. That's not what the comp plan calls for at this point.
I would also offer two things based on that conversation. One, maybe rather than thinking of it as being clunky, what we're really talking about are areas where it can seem duplicative or at least multi-layered, where you're introducing into the request another opportunity to say no. And you've all heard that at various times with PDs and CDPs and various things over time. So that's one thing about it. The other thing to keep in mind is I think what BJ and Elena are talking about, and what you need to hear is we're talking about pre-approved development patterns. That pre-approval still gets done at this council level. It's just that you're looking at it one time to say, given this set of elements, all other things being equal, this is something that can go to site plan and TRC review and move forward. So you're still going to have some discussions around what those standards are, what those buffers or barriers are that you want to see in order to be able to make what's happening internal occur. So it's not, you're still having an approval. It's just that you're pre-approving something so that the future applicant doesn't have a multi-layered process to have to go through where they're spending a lot of money on the front end, be it on engineering or financing or any other number of things that the group has been very open and discussed. And they can at least go into it with an understanding that if I meet all of these things that the council has already now said they pre-approve in order to get this product into the market, you've just removed a lot of unknown from the whole equation. So that may just be another way of thinking about it relative to some of the concerns I think I'm hearing you express.
that's a good way to put it. I think that what I'm hearing also is you want some direction, which of these pathways we kind of like. I feel like pathway 1 is supported by the comprehensive long-range plan. Pathway 2 is supported by the comprehensive long-range plan. ADUs, I don't think are going to solve a big problem, but they can be a part of the solution. And I think pathway 3 is interesting, very much similar to what we just discussed. I think those would be my 3. So just,
1, 2, and 3? Okay.
I think all of those, with the exception of number 3, which I think is a bit innovative and I like it, the other 2 are things that were supported by the CLRP.
Are there other questions from council?
I think just a question for Reagan. When you talked about another opportunity to say no, you were addressing conditional zoning. Is that right? Was that what you were saying?
Well, not necessarily, no. I'm talking about that. Actually, the perfect example of that is BJ's description of you go through this entire process and then there's this major subdivision also.
Okay.
So you will hear from those that have had poor experiences,
Right. Okay.
comments like a second bite at the apple, or
Right.
I felt like I went through the CDP and we wrapped all of this up, but when I brought the PDP in, and I hate to pick on the plan development, but it's just what comes to mind as I'm sitting
Right,
here.
that's fine.
But when I brought the PDP in, now you're wanting me to go back and do X, Y, or Z, and I didn't necessarily agree to that at the CDP level. So it's really just kind of, it's more of any of the multi-layered processes or things you see come before you that you feel like you've seen it before, and sometimes you might question, why am I looking at this? but it's because it's two different applications or stages in the process as the UDO currently sets it up. And please correct me or add in where that,
No, I totally agree, and I just wish to add an example of that is, again, a simple example that we encounter in the office on a regular basis is we have made it so that you can do a duplex with a conditional zoning district, right? Okay, great, except that we have this minimum lot size that says in certain zones you have to have 10,000 square feet for the first dwelling unit and 6,000 square feet for each additional dwelling unit after that. So you can't do a duplex and you have to, unless you have at least 16,000 square feet. I say, man, we could put a duplex on quite a bit less land than 16,000 feet and have it still be pretty cool. And so those are the opportunities where you look at it and you say, yeah, there's these things in there. This doesn't allow this and this doesn't allow this, and we can deal with that. It's not as broad as going through and rewriting entire sections of the UDO. It's simply, we can fix that and that and that and that under the auspices of housing. But the reason we're here is because it's still change, and none of the things we can do will completely satisfy the home building community, because there's just a number of things that are processed that are kind of what, we do that to make sure the process is the product. Sometimes the process results in the product that the town needs. And on the other hand, though, we can't satisfy everybody who doesn't want change in their backyard, period,
Right.
ever.
So if we shift, if we make it less restrictive, and you say you can build a duplex on less square footage than you can right now, and then we say perfection is the oppressor, and we were not perfect, and we made a mistake, and this is a problem because blank. We can't do a thing about that now based on what the legislature's done. We can't undo the zoning. We can't undo. We are committed to a UDO shift once we make it. Is that right? Based on the current legislative response. We can't change. We can't downzone.
I understand your question, and why you're asking it, because yes, that would be a concern. If you go in and let's say you loosen a regulation,
Right.
therefore you're not creating nonconformities, so you
Right.
can loosen it. Then suddenly you realize, we loosened it too much. You want to tighten
Right.
it, and something was approved under that regulation that you would now create that would be a nonconformity. Under the current legislation, that would be that presents a challenge.
You would not be
There's a lot
allowed
of time.
to
There is a
tighten
lot
up.
of time between now and when we would get to that to carefully assess what's happening with legislation.
Okay.
And so, but I understand the nature of your question and that concern.
Okay.
Councilman, sorry,
No,
Ann,
it's okay.
can you think of something that would be an example or something like that? I hear, now I do understand what you're saying. I guess I'm just trying to fathom what kind of.
I've got Mac waving in. I just
Oh,
want to
I'm
make sure that we
sorry.
have our attorney speak before.
One of the obvious examples is location. It sounds like a good idea in the abstract, and then when it gets put in a location that people object, that's the most likely.
But that's what we would be expecting anyway, as according to what BJ and Elaine have said, in terms of anything we do, building I'm sorry, Reagan. No, just saying.
I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine, no.
That's why I usually turn that off.
Building a quadplex next to, a single-family home. Someone's lived there all their lives, and they don't want to see all of these extra tenants. We're expecting that. So, I mean, we're trying to weigh the cost of giving someone a place to live, as opposed to giving someone all the comforts of what they're used to for 20, 30 years. I don't know.
Two thoughts. One in immediate, maybe as an example of what I think you're asking a question. If, for instance, we were to suddenly allow, and we already allow for ADUs, so I want to be careful how I say this, but if we allowed for scenarios with ADUs that decreased the setbacks and allowed for access by easement like BJ talked about, and then something occurred that we said, oh man, we missed this. Would it be difficult, as the legislation currently reads, to go back and change that because you'd suddenly can create a nonconformity of something you allowed to go on the ground? It would seem that, yeah, potentially that could be a
That would be
concern,
tough,
no
yeah.
question. The second observation,
On that first thing, when you say create easements for ADUs, what is that? What is that? What is an example of creating an easement for an ADU?
if you want to address that one, BJ, it has to do with the creation of a lot if the ADU is going to be owned, but.
Okay, we have a standard right now that, interestingly, about 4 or 5 years ago, we tried to change. But right now, in certain zones, you can use an easement for access to a lot. In certain zones, you can use an an easement for access up to 3 lots. In certain zones, you can use an easement for access up to 25 dwelling units. And in certain zones, you may not use an easement for access to a lot, period, RS2. And so we have a lot of properties zoned RS2. And so you cannot use an easement for access to a lot. Now, it's a slight, the ADU, an accessory dwelling unit built by me in the back of my house, well, you know, above my garage. Yeah, above my garage, for example. Very familiar with my house, because he built it. That's just, you know, digging deeper here. Like, just shut up. All right. Anyway.
Help you out of the hole.
Yeah.
Go ahead, bro.
Anyways, so an ADU above my garage, for example, and my plan is to rent it. No, the access is not an issue. But under a scenario where you have large lots in an area that turns out once the swing set is rusty, you know, and you're looking at that and you're saying, I could sell that. That's a lot. That's big enough to put a small house on. That lot being created and subdivided, let's say you had a way to do it administratively. How do you get to it if you can't use an easement to get to it? My driveway can't be an
Right.
easement. So it's,
That wouldn't be an ADU though. At that
no, most likely it would not be. In that case, it would be something where you're carving out a lot to sell it.
Sorry, I just, I think, yeah.
This is very familiar to you, so, yeah.
Which is kind of part of pathway to that conversation.
The second observation I wanted to just offer is the beauty of this conversation is that it's truly planning in nature, because what you're talking about are ways to get at goals that you're going to set up, and directly in reaction to exactly what Attorney McCarley said. And it's why I hesitate to use words like clunky, because there is an awful lot of code that gets written as a knee-jerk reaction to something that occurs that isn't liked. And you don't have these conversations in advance about what the goal was or what you had hoped would occur, and you end up with these layers and layers of code, and there's reason behind them, and more often than not, the reason is something that somebody did that they used poor judgment in doing, or that just went against community standards. So you're able to have these conversations, look at it at predetermined plans without thinking about, oh wait, it's over in the middle of this neighborhood, or I know so-and-so that came out to the meeting and isn't very happy. I mean, this is truly an opportunity to look at, do you consider it a problem? On what level do you believe Southern Pines should be a part of any solution? And how do you get there without it being an immediate, very localized issue before you? So that's purely an observation.
That's the
but
sweet
it's-
spot. That's well said, and I officially wish to strike from the record my use of the word clunky, because, please.
Don't let me infringe on your rights to speak. It's,
No, I think that's well summarized. In fact, I just leaned over and Elena and I both, given the conversations we've had with the focus group and the feedback we've gotten, this conversation is just gold to us, because it's policymakers discussing it outside of an individual hearing and giving us their thoughts and feedback on these issues that we can then move mountains as a staff to implement the wishes of the elected officials and the focus groups and the voters. So, yeah.
Right, and I think in response to Ms. Gray, I think that we are trying to balance not only what the comprehensive planning plan is asking for, but you're also trying to balance a tree ordinance and just the issue of setback itself. So if you can have less of a setback, you're going to take down more trees. And so there are just a lot of balls that we're juggling in the air. And I also think, and we've talked about this, the way you would break into, I mean, we talked about this as it relates to my concerns regarding the ETJ. If it's taken over by the county, then the rules that apply in Northmore, where you can do a flag lot and make a lot of little lots. I mean, you know, the people who own the house can also then put in a trailer for each one of their kids with one flag driveway in. Then do those rules start to apply to West Southern Pines, which is not ETJ, but do they apply to horse country? And, or do I think it's really important to take the long view, and I think that, I also think I totally support 100% the affordability. I mean, I have taught shoulder to shoulder with many a teacher who could not afford to live in Moore County, and yet taught beside me at Pinecrest. So I'm incredibly sympathetic to that. So, but I also don't want to, throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I think there are a lot of concerns. There are a lot of things we need to balance, and I think we need to consider all of them. And maybe the first step is. I don't really object to the use of clunky, because if it feels clunky to you guys and you guys are the ones who deal with it all the time, I think we need to be apprised of what you think is clunky, and we need to address whether or not there's a way, is there, I know you're going to regret it forever, is there a way to address that in a way that's fair to everybody and also addresses all of our different objectives that sometimes are in opposition to one another? So I think that's more my concern. Anyway,
No, I-
How do you feel about pathways 1, 2, and 3, just in general?
I think if I were saying, I would say go ahead with your. I would like to go at it as, tell me what you think is clunky. There's still a part of me that would like to have an incentivized reason for someone to address making housing for workforce affordable. And I think it's really important that we respect all the objectives we have. So I don't know that I answered your question, except to say that, yeah, you bring me what you think is clunky about the UDO. I appreciate that we're trying to follow what was set forth as far as the 10-year plan, which is great, and I support it. And I'm sympathetic to the cause.
Looks like you have a question as well, or a comment.
Well, incentivized reason, what do you mean by incentivized reason?
What is a reason that a developer would have to, to provide it, to have the end goal to provide housing for workforce? So, and again, I get it. We're not in the real estate business. I get that this is an impossible situation.
We are not going into this assuming or hoping for benevolence on the part of
Right. Understandably.
builders of homes.
Right.
What we're looking for is, is there a reason to build this product that will hit the market at $300,000? Can I make the same amount of money as this product that hits the market at $750,000? Maybe I can even make a little more money over here because of whatever variable that can be
Density.
tweaked, because of the density. And so, no, there's no hope here that we're just going to find a series of developers that are willing to make less money or
Right.
take less profit margin.
Nor will all constituents come up and hug us. I get it. I understand. I understand that it basically is going to, if done correctly, probably make everybody upset, which is great.
So in general, I feel like affordability in Southern Pines, or lack of affordability in Southern Pines, happened very quickly, like over a span of just a few years. Houses in downtown Southern Pines have doubled in 5 years. That's an anecdotal number, but it's
Pretty close.
and so I like these efforts to try to create some affordable housing so that not just teachers, but staff and nurses and firefighters and even, other folks that are none of those professions can have somewhere nearer than farther away to find some housing options. I just don't want our attempts to solve this problem to take longer than how quickly the lack of affordability came upon us. And sometimes we get this analysis by paralysis deal where it's just like we talk and talk and talk, and then ultimately we don't do anything. So while I say things like I want to get the other communities involved, I mean, they're only going to do what they want to do. And So we have to do our part, and hopefully we lead by example.
I agree with Councilman Goodman. And I also agree with the different pathways that you chose as well. I did look at pathway 4. And I'm wondering whether or not that could be something that could still go adjacent to one of the other pathways, since it doesn't really involve any real changes to our UDOs and everything else. So was that considered to go along? I see the partners would be Habitat, Land and Trust, Central Pines Regional Council, and the town, to find grants, am I right? Yeah. So, help improve what's there.
Yeah, I'd say this one's a little bit less, the path is less clear, right? About what what exactly we would do next. I think that the first step would be get us all in a room and start talking about, okay, how do we help? What can the town do to help? And what are you already doing that's helping? And so it's some of those initial conversations of just defining the problem and where the need is, and then going and then seeing where we can actually do something. Grants is a great example of one thing that may be able to be done, but it's not the only thing, and then we just have to figure out what those other things are.
Pathway 4 as taking longer to achieve. It's pretty broad, 4 and 5 rather. It's a pretty broad scope, and I think it's going to take a fair amount of time to make those happen, where I think 1, 2, and 3 can happen quicker.
I had a question that I was gonna, before Councilwoman Gray brought it up, that I'd written down, if there were specific things that Habitat and the Southern Pine Land and Housing Trust were working towards that these support, and maybe Pathway 4 is something that they can lead the way on. And if they come up with things they feel like can make a difference in their work that we can support, then that would be something that maybe we don't spearhead, but let them come to us with ideas.
You're talking about financially supporting?
No, I think that that's opening a checkbook to anyone in town. I think that supporting through policy.
There wasn't someone from the Land and Housing Trust on the focus group, was there? There was.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes that support comes in the way of letters of support for a grant application. Sometimes
Right.
it may be a grant that they have found that we have to be the lead agency on because it's only available to a municipal entity or a government. So
Yeah,
those are
grants,
some
things like- yep.
examples. And I'd also offer relative to number 5, and I think, I believe the way Elena has put that forward is sort of that we would lead the charge in getting a group together. I've got to believe that at some point a group will end up being formed that I think we will have an interest in taking part with. And depending on what comes out of all these others, we may have a lot to bring to the table and offer. But just based upon, I know in conversations with Natalie Hawkins and what she deals with there at the Economic Development Partnership, some of the things going on with the chambers. We have some major employers in the area, and this is particularly true being a tourism and service economy that we are, that this is a real issue for relative to their workforce. We have our own challenges. I've experienced a huge evolution and shift just in trying to recruit people over the 20 years that I've been here, and their ability to live in Southern Pines versus just on the outskirts versus maybe commuting from adjacent counties. So this is an issue that I think is relative to a Pathway 5. I think there's going to be some larger look at it. And quite honestly, the Bowen National Research thing is sort of an example of that, and a step one just to have the data that's being presented to you today. This is a conversation in a lot of different sectors, and out of those larger multi-jurisdictional, multi-group conversations is where potentially some of these housing authorities and these other entities may come that can follow up on trying to keep something affordable for 30 years or some of those other things that were part of the early discussion. That's a large undertaking and ask for Southern Pines as a singular entity, but if you take in all of the entities of Moore County as an example, it becomes something that maybe can be tackled.
Do you know that this housing shortage on page 28 or on page 2 of the focus group, there's a graph there that says that total housing shortage by 2029 is 7,724. That's just Moore County. That graph with a little black box that says 7, yes, that's 7724. That's,
for Moore County, not
okay, Moore County. And so the majority,
together that chart is in the room with us.
okay, so I think we can expect that the majority of that is going to be in southern Moore County.
Assuming that we're not sprawling into the county.
Right.
Again, sprawl is a part of the conversation too,
And
because
so this is 1,600 houses a year over the next 5 years above what is currently being built. Is,
it's a good point that you're bringing up, because we do have currently entitled projects that were approved or they're in some part of the pipeline, right, of from idea to construction, that do address some of the gaps that we already have.
yeah.
But right, they're not everything. And most of those products are multifamily. And a lot of what we've been talking about today, actually, you'll probably have noticed in the memo, we don't say multifamily, but maybe a couple times, because really we think the solution is the missing middle is townhomes, duplexes, quads and tris, and ADUs and kind of non-conventional options. Did I get your question?
Yeah, I was just, if we're going to be 1,600 houses short a year, and we're building, I don't know, 1,000 a year, let's just assume, it's 2,600 houses a year over the next 5 years.
I think to get at your question as an example, because Elena brought up the multifamily, when you look at the gap in multifamily, it does not include things that were not built and being lived in at the time of the study. So there's quite a few multifamily units that will presumably be built and open prior to 2029. Does it add up to that number? No. But the gap isn't quite what that looks like, because there are some things in various stages of the funnel.
Yeah.
This discussion in many ways is building upon a foundation of previous policy decisions.
Right.
Some of which being, are we going to try to provide the entire, gap or the entire shortcoming of housing in Moore County? Is that our goal? No, it never has been.
No.
Yeah. And so, but on the other hand, are we going to say, well, we don't want more housing, or since we can't provide the entire amount, we won't provide any? We haven't decided that. So what we have decided is, the comp plan has been adopted with a policy of we should attempt to provide workforce housing. And so attempt is, again, the perfection being the enemy of progress. That's what this project is all about.
And relative to your observation that I assume this will occur in southern Moore County, I would proffer that is going to be subject to a confluence of a number of factors, one being what is allowed to ultimately be built in the various communities of southern Moore County, two being the county's current land use plan efforts and what that ultimately manifests itself in relative to their development policies. It's conceivable, depending on where you want to draw your line in describing southern Moore County, but it's conceivable that will occur in large part, I'll call it middle Moore County. Does it go all the way up to the border? Probably not, barring some economic development opportunities or things. But, if the county kind of opens up the floodgates and the ETJs are taken away from the municipalities and there's no reason for development to annex in order to develop, be it in a Southern Pines or an Aberdeen or a Pinehurst, a lot of that could occur. I'll say, if you describe southern Moore County as kind of the Southern Pines, Aberdeen, Pinehurst, Tri-City area, I think a lot of that could potentially be occurring just outside of those three communities, dependent upon a lot of factors, both in this room and a lot of other municipal chambers, and then what the county commissioners ultimately choose to do relative to their development policies.
Yeah, I think all this information screams to us that we're set up for sprawl if we're not careful. That's exactly what all this information says. And we know what that movie looks like.
Yep.
we being collectively.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've seen what sprawl looks like in other communities, so.
Yeah. If there are no other questions. Okay.
Just great work. Lots of thought-provoking work. Really very thoughtful. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can't control the free market, but we can reduce our processes that drive prices up, and we can work on our regulations that limit supply, that add to that equation causing the problem. I hear that we want to ask our neighbors to help us with these goals. I think it came up at the Tri-City meeting today. And if we put together some text amendments, I would say that we ask our neighbors to review those and consider some of their own. It also came up this afternoon that there are, besides the ETJ legislature bill that may be taking it away, there's other things that may be limiting our regulation, limiting our control. And so I would say that if we start drawing up changes to our UDO, some text amendments, that we also keep an eye on what's happening at the state level so that we're not giving up control while we're having control taken away from us at the same time. So just making sure that we still have, I don't know, some level of oversight or direction for where development happens. Do you all feel comfortable with asking staff to prepare text amendments and maybe along with those, some consequences that would come along with those amendments?
Definitely.
Is the focus group going to meet again as a result of this meeting?
That's the hope, yeah, May.
So does it help to focus our pathways for the next focus group?
Yeah. So
This has been a spectacular discussion, and really, this is policy made. This is the good stuff, and this is exciting to me. We've heard pathways 1, 2, and 3. We've heard a commitment from the elected officials of, yes, pathways 1, 2, and 3, and receptive to ideas. We work on some staff ideas. We take it back to the focus group. We test it against the focus group. Would this do anything? They say to us, this, I could see doing something. This one is garbage. We go back, we take the garbage, we recycle that and come in with a third option. We take it and we say to the focus group, what about this? Yeah, that wouldn't hurt. Okay, and now we've got a text amendment ready to go, and we bring it back and we run it through the process. It goes to planning board. We're keeping them informed. The focus group, hopefully members of the focus group will be there at the planning board meeting, at the town council meeting, et cetera. And that's the process from here in a nutshell. Yeah.
all right.
Cool.
Thank you so much. To the people in our focus group, those who are here and not here, thank you all for the time you put into
Thank
this.
you.
It's a big deal. It's something that we've been hearing during the tenure of our elected careers, and probably before that. So thank you for helping.
And by the way, Elena recognized everyone else, but I want to recognize Elena and James and Mason, the
Yes.
project team on our team that have spent a lot of time on this, and I've seen them thinking about it, preparing things, and they've worked very hard, and we're very proud of them. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I know it comes from the heart, Elena, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, we have fiscal year 25-26 budget introduction.
Yes, now that you've had your light conversation for the afternoon, we'll move on to something else. And I'm going to thank Director Grieve also for just bringing up garbage and recycling. It's a great segue into some of the conversation we're about to have. So I'm going to, in short order, turn the mic over to Assistant Manager Roth, who's got a little presentation for you. And the purpose this afternoon is threefold, and I just kind of want to set the stage for that. Number one is to have a discussion about our general revenue estimates for next fiscal year ahead of next week's retreat with the Town Council. This will allow us, now that you will have seen these figures and kind of the concepts behind them, to really focus on the expenditures and the work plan when we get together next week. So
Manager
number one
Parsons,
is,
can you remind us the date just so we can make sure it's on our calendars? I think it snuck up on all of us.
I believe it's next Thursday, is that the 3rd or the 5th?
It's the third.
3rd, thank you.
Oh, my
Next
God.
Thursday, April the 3rd,
Okay, thank you.
Fire Station number 2.
Thank you.
So number one, it's to set the stage for that day by getting the revenue side of the equation not out of the way, but very far along before we begin to talk about the draft expenditure plan. Number two, council had expressed some interest in ultimately developing some 3 to 5 year projections for budgeting purposes. So Jessica has included in this presentation a number of analyses and trends that are the sort of thing that we have to look like as we start to build that model, because the key to that model will always be the assumptions that feed it on both the revenue and the expenditure side. So you're going to see some numbers and analysis that she's put together that you're going to find interesting, positive in some ways, negative in others, but it's really with an eye toward beginning to prepare to be able to do some of those longer term projections that we've discussed. And then finally, you'll recall that last year we sort of set a policy moving forward, which means it's always subject to change, but a policy moving forward of trying to collect in the waste fee that is set each year 100% of the commercial expense of garbage recycling, and then 75% of the residential of garbage recycling and the environmental services, yard debris services. So Jessica has broken down that estimated figure for the coming year and the resulting fee that will meet that 75, 100%. That is the number that we have utilized for the revenue analysis she's about to go through. If council is wishing to change direction on sort of the way we set that up last year, you can do that all the way up to the budget. If we know it sooner than later, though, it could very well affect some of the things that we put into your draft expenditures for next week, because it's not a small amount of money, obviously, relative to our revenue stream. So those are the three items. Again, revenue projections heading into next week, just some analysis of, in particular, some of our larger revenue streams, and then finally, specific discussion around the solid waste recycling and yard fee that appears on the monthly utility bills. So with that, I'll let Jessica take the mic.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, since we've already used the word environmental services fees about 12 times now, I'm going to go ahead and kick off with that one. That was also in your packet that you received on Friday, if you've had a chance to look over it. I just want to say this has been a monumental year for the council, the town, the community, and especially Mike and his public works team in terms of environmental services. We have done a tremendous amount of work over the past 12 to 18 months. We launched our own environmental services division. Officially, we started collecting January 1 of last year, yard debris from about 6,500 homes, although we really kind of started the fall before in kind of a light mode. It's been a challenging year. We have surpassed tonnage with what our previous hauler did. We have improved customer service, and these were both goals of ours. It has been challenging because even with brand new trucks, it is rare that we've had a week with all three of them operating all week long. We've had some warranty issues. We've had a lot of hydraulic issues. They're frequently in the garage. And so I also owe a kudos to our garage team, because they have ramped up and learned how to take care of these new pieces of equipment. So those are all learning things that we've had. We've also had some injuries on the job that has taken people out for a while and on light duty. So we've had a ton of overtime and just really hard work by that team who has been out there all year long. So I just want to highlight what they have all done. And of course, under Corey and Chief Cameron's leadership. Another big thing that obviously was when we kicked off with the Meridian contract, January 1. This is the second time that I know Corey Albers, our Public Works Director, has been through a transition with solid waste vendors. And so he kind of knew what to expect. So we were able to rely on his expertise. And I think if he were here, he would tell you that this one went better than the last time. And of course, we had some lessons learned, but we also have a really good partner in Meridian. I think the biggest challenge for us, and I'm going to say challenge, but it's also a little bit of a surprise, is the number of recycling subscribers that we've had. As of last week, we have 2,000 subscribers. And if you remember at this time when we were budgeting last year, if you'll recall the way the contract is set up, it's in 4 different tiers and it breaks at 650. So we pay one rate for 0 to 650 customers. Basically that doubles at 651. We were budgeting for that first tier thinking, if we get to 350, well, we're at 2,000. So that is a lot.
Are we still getting applications for it?
Not to the degree that we were, but yes, we are still getting applications. So that has slowed down, but Tess's utility billing team, they also get kudos because, man, did they ramp it up to process and get 2,000 recycling subscribers enrolled. And then the challenge became, and honestly, delivering the carts because that was, Meridian's work, but they said, we're already picking up trash. They literally didn't have the manpower. So we've had all kinds of employees from firefighters to parks and grounds to streets to you name it has been out getting those carts on the street. So I think at this point, is it safe to say we're kind of in a new norm now? Everything's kind of leveled off?
We would expect to see a continued smaller level of signups just based on move-ins, new builds, people that just decide to recycle. But,
Yeah.
but we think we're over the
We think
mass
we're over
push.
the initial.
Jessica, is
Surge.
that, I think there's like 2 or maybe 3 of those guys in that garage that handle all the trucks and
Four,
everything.
yeah.
4 of them? Okay, so when I did the tour, it was only a few of them. So kudos to them because those guys, I know they work hard.
Oh,
and,
yes.
yeah, that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. No, it has absolutely been a team effort, even from the days that the cart arrives. They literally come on a tractor trailer and that driver says, okay, and it's all hands on deck to unload. So I just want to say from our level, and I think on behalf of you, thank you to everybody who has made this transition go so well for our community. So based on that, at this point, we now have a full year of environmental services work complete. So we kind of have a good idea of what that takes and what our expenditures are to maintain that level of service. We're also officially into the Meridian contract now. And there are some nice benefits from this contract in terms of budgeting because we pay a flat fee for both collection and disposal. Our previous contract, we paid the actual disposal costs, but we had no way of predicting those ahead of budget time. So this is a little more straightforward for us. So there is a 4% CPI in their contract, so we've applied that. And so we've really done the forecast based on where we know the contract fees are going to be, where our current customer base is, and then what we've seen in terms of environmental services fees for kind of the past 18-ish months or so. And so where that lands us is right at total expenditures of just a little over $3 million for all of those services for next year. And so when you apply that cost recovery percentage that Town Manager Parsons discussed earlier of 100% from commercial customers, 75%, assuming that's what you want to continue, and then the $10 recycling subscription for next year, that would put the residential customer fee at $25.25 a month,
Plus $10.
plus $10 for those who recycle, yes. And that $10, even with the CPI, we feel is still going to be adequate based on where we're at with the tiers. So
What's the price right now? Just remind me the residential price.
it is $21.
So how is it that our fees are capped at a 4% index increase and we're going up 8%.
So there's a few different variables that make up
Maybe
that
16%.
25, 25.
More than that.
One of it is that if you remember, the $21 covered two different contracts. We had 6 months of GFL, and then we had 6 months of Meridian. GFL's contract was lower, and so we were able to benefit for 6 months of pricing with that. Meridian's is higher, and so we only had to pay those for 6 months. And of course, the 4% CPI was not in there for 6 months. So we've got that in terms of a contract price. Our environmental services fees also make up that as well. Those are right at, we have projected 1.17 million for next year.
How much
Those-
per account is that?
That's actually right at $15 a month per house.
Environmental services alone, which is what we were paying before. Pretty much. But we couldn't find we couldn't find anyone to provide services that was going to include it.
We did not get any betters. So, so that was always our feeling, is that we weren't necessarily going to be able to be any more cost efficient. We did feel confident about our ability to improve customer service and to get it more on a standard, and we've definitely been successful there. But the costs are, and some of a little more than 10% of the environmental services fees are the tipping fees at Moore County, and we don't influence that at all. So we have to account for those increases and whatever tonnage, that we do. And honestly, because we have provided better service, we're collecting more than the previous vendor. So we're tipping more and we're paying more. So, so it's costing us more to provide better service.
Do you want us to wait till the end to ask you questions, or do you, there's a question that's relevant?
No, I'm happy to take
Okay.
questions.
So there's still a problem. I've actually watched it happen twice now. There's still a problem that landscapers are dropping loads into yards. And I'm wondering if, I have all three managers here. I'm wondering if we have pursued that in any instance, and do we need a UDO code that sets a substantial fine? I mean, you're generally talking about what the landscaper has on his or her truck is probably a $5 load at the dump. But it is a significant issue when Daniel and his crew come down the road, or when apparently West Southern Pines is a big target. Apparently abandoned places that do not currently have residents get large amounts of yard waste dumped in their front yard. If there's a community watch system in place, and if we have a license plate number, what are the consequences of that? What are the repercussions? Can anybody answer that question for me?
To that, I'm going to call Chief Cameron up. I know a little bit about it, but he certainly knows more, since Daniel and Corey work with him a
So,
little more directly.
as you mentioned, Daniel is pretty aggressive about that when we find someone. The problem is catching someone. He's really good about addressing that. I will tell you that on one occasion, we've involved law enforcement, and that's about the extent of that. It is very difficult to catch somebody doing that. Now, as a reminder, if you have a landscaper and he works at your property and he is perfectly good with leaving that on the property, and we'll pick that up.
He or she?
Stand corrected, you're correct.
Put that out there.
But if they're bringing something from other people's property.
That's what's happening.
That is an issue. We have addressed that several times, but there's not some fine other than we call law enforcement and we try to wrangle that into an illegal dumping type situation, but that's even a stretch.
That's hard. And a cell phone photo helps if people have a picture of it happening, and also a license plate. And then I've sent 2 or 3 of those. If someone is confronted, if a landscaper is confronted in that regard, is it first a warning? What happens? Do we have steps? Do we have procedures?
So what we're doing with that is obviously, we've explained to them to begin with, hey, you can't do that, you're not allowed to do that, where did this come from? We try to do that, but that's usually some of our staff doing that.
Right.
The one instance, I know where we involved law enforcement, it was a second time from the same company, and we involved law enforcement. They still didn't receive a ticket, but to our knowledge, they've not done it anymore once law enforcement has spoken to them.
Okay.
Offer the ability to potentially elevate may very well depend upon the evidence that you have.
Right.
too.
Oh, I
It's,
agree.
you know,
I agree.
A
Right.
photo of a truck with the name on the side of it and
Right.
I-
Which has happened 2
Oh,
or
I-
3 times.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know that because I send that to you.
Yep.
So when that does happen, I'm just wondering if, I live with Nancy Drew in my neighborhood, okay? So we've cracked the case a couple times. So is that a waste of citizens' time? And you're talking about the increased tonnage that we're dropping. And it makes sense when somebody leaves a giant tree trunk, a giant tree trunk in Western Pines.
So we have limitations of what we'll pick up.
Yeah.
We do not pick up giant tree trunks.
But the problem is then
It's stuck on the property.
it's stuck on the property and that person who lives there or who doesn't live there, the owner of that property then becomes responsible for that which was dumped on the property. So that's not okay. Can we assist you by having a fine that is a mandate from us?
To be entirely honest, I think we're going to have a hard time policing that.
Understand?
I think that you can give a fine, and then I don't think our environmental services staff are the ones that's going to be doing the fine. That's going to go back to our zoning and enforcement folks.
Right.
Handling that, and again, that would get them involved.
And it's just, it's like we don't do real estate and we don't do,
I think we have a struggle with that. I'm not saying that, no, never, we don't want that, but I'm just trying to work through my head how it would function.
Right. What is the deterrent then when a landscaper brings a load of brush and trees from another town, from Aberdeen, from Pinehurst, from Pine Bluff, and drops it in?
We have to prove that it's not on that property, that it is from another town.
Right.
When we do that, if we either go through that zoning path and they'll get sent a letter and possibly a fine, or in certain instances, in one instance, because it was something that happened multiple times, we involve law enforcement.
Have all landscapers been notified of the rules of the game? Have we sent a notification to everybody?
If we could perhaps maybe separate this
Yeah, that's fine.
discussion, because it's really not a budgetary discussion, and I'd certainly appreciate
Not primarily, right, but you're talking about tonnage and that, I just want,
but we don't believe that that's contributing
okay.
in a large way
I-
to
I-
the increased tonnage. I think it would be helpful if we could have some time to think about it and think about, if there are suggestions, and then have a separate discussion on that issue
Okay.
alone, because it would
respect-
require.
I respect that.
appreciate
What were you trying to say?
the offer on things like have all landscapers. I think we all know, we could probably name a dozen landscapers we're familiar with, but particularly since there's no business licenses anymore, it would be impossible for us probably to come up with a database of all landscapers, because
Right.
sometimes it's somebody 17-year-old that's doing it for the summer and yeah.
I'm going to bring us back around to what Jessica recommended,
Right.
which is back to your presentation. I know we have a limitation on time this evening with some of our council members.
So we want to talk about where were you? Where did you leave off about the fees?
Yeah. So I think I had, the last question I had was just kind
tonnage.
of explaining how we got to the increase. And I think I had about wrapped up
Okay.
that. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or go into more detail about anything.
So in base, the 4% cap is on the Meridian part of the equation, the well, it's not even recycling, it's the garbage. And then there's the environmental services, yeah.
Your environmental services was paid for how?
It was paid for through the same fee, which we also subsidized.
Was it?
It was 28.75%
Well,
last year.
but environmental services was in-house as of January last year, which means it was no longer part of the GFL.
Correct.
Okay. But it was part of our equation. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
But we also,
Purely estimating what we thought it was going to cost for the year too, because we didn't have a history yet.
right,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
I have a couple
I
questions.
mean, we've had a lot of overtime too, that we hadn't necessarily budgeted for, but to maintain that service level of 2 collections a month. I mean, we've had our crews working on weekends and we've had them on holidays and things like that. And so
Which is
we've had to pay overtime,
which is
has
probably
increased
why the
our
providers we
fees.
had before wouldn't quote the service. And so
In
we
part.
took over a problematic service rather than fixing the service.
Has the overtime, were you done? Sorry.
Yes, I'm done.
Was the overtime a result of injuries and people being out and a need, just a shorthandedness?
It's a lot of different factors. Some of it is because of that, yes, because it takes a minimum of 2 people for
Right.
each truck that goes out. Some of it was because of the trucks being in the garage. So if we
Right.
couldn't take one of them out and then it came back late in the week, we'd run, a route on a Saturday. Some of it's just pure volume. If they can't get to everything in 5 days, they've been out there on Saturdays. They've really been working hard
Oh,
to
they've
do
been,
that
they
2
are
collections a month because we
spectacular.
knew that was such a frustration from the previous vendor. So that's been our main goal. Do you want to add
I have a
anything
couple
to
of
that?
questions, and some of
Yeah.
these might be on the spot, so I don't know, you don't have to necessarily answer it now, but I do want to hear back from you.
Mhm.
So the 100% rate in this proposal
Mhm.
is moved from last year at a rate of 17%, but then the 75% I call rebate versus subsidy moved at a rate of 20%.
Mhm.
So I'm just questioning why those didn't move the same.
I'd have to go back and they're all tied to the
Yeah.
overall
All right,
figures.
that's
so.
one question. And then 44% of our 100% cost is yard debris for twice a month service. 44% of that cost is for the yard debris. Just observations.
How many people do you think participate in yard debris pickup?
They can participate at any time, right?
Exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You may not participate for 3 months.
Well, I don't have a yard, so I'm never going to participate, but all right.
I meant,
Yes.
I meant
I'm
Councilman.
happy to help pay it.
I meant Councilman Peck. He may not participate for 3 months and then participate for the next 6 months.
You don't
We're
even-
getting ready to go into the busy season because springtime, we're getting ready to be really busy.
Fall.
Yeah, spring and fall is when we hit it pretty hard. So it is, we have numbers on that, but I will go and tell you right now, because we track that with the data system we're using, but it's very difficult to correlate those numbers with any consistency. It is different every single route.
And that was the way recycling was previously. And you could participate at any time.
Yeah, so I actually want to make a statement on the recycling estimate because when we had the consultant come in and estimate how many households, because our number of 350 was not completely random, it was based on tonnage, which the fact that our estimate was 350 and now we have over 2,000 people speaks to the volumes that our previous provider was not putting into the recycling. Because the tonnage would have reflected more households.
We-
It was going
Sam,
into the
And we can't,
municipal waste.
we don't have any way to disagree
No,
with that.
I mean,
There's a
that's-
lot of people who would probably agree with you 100%
Yeah.
on that. I will tell you that some of our preliminary discussions with Meridian, I'm very confident in what they're doing. And you can probably tell that by numbers
Yeah.
because they strive to get to that point. So
I would like to go back and double check though, because are you saying he estimated 350 users of recycling? Because I remember a 35% number, but not, because 350 sounds really low.
My recollection of the 350 was from the budget retreat last year. And when it was purely when we were trying to set an estimated revenue number based on collecting $10. And we were having no idea how many
Yeah.
people would voluntarily subscribe.
Because we
That's
knew
what
we
I
were
remember.
in for at minimum 650 tier one.
650.
Yes.
expense. And maybe that's where the three, I
was like, I
just don't
remember-
remember Dave ever bringing up 350 users, because I think we always
Yeah, I
exceeded
think
that.
350 was a budgetary number, and I wasn't at the. but-
He did estimate it on tonnage. I don't know what the actual number was. Maybe it was 35%. And then we
Okay.
lowered it because we assumed that the fee was going to
Yeah.
cause some people to stop using it.
Right.
Missed a lot of blocks. I did a tour myself just in my area, my recyclables and a couple other places. I said, wow, he's not, and I didn't call Reagan. Reagan looked at me because you always call me. I didn't call. I just wanted to see. So yeah.
And to that point, another thing that I do want to add that I don't want to get missed is we added the Rubicon to all of the trucks, which includes Meridian's as well as ours. And that has considerably improved our customer service because we can see exactly what's been collected. We can see where they are at any point in time. There's a camera, so we know if people's carts were out there or if they weren't. And if they do miss, we can go back and look, and we do. So
And I have a couple more things.
before you get to that, can I had a moment of clarity on a little bit of your question. I'll probably have to go back and do a little more math. The $21 was not necessarily set at retreat last year to cover 75% of costs. When I came up with that rough 75%, that's about what our current year's expenditures have been. We ultimately just decided last year at retreat, let's go with kind of a flat $21 where we were looking, but it wasn't
Oh, I thought it said
necessarily tied
75%.
to a percentage at that point. So I think that's maybe why when you're seeing the 21 versus
Oh, I didn't know I read
the
it. here. It says
33.75.
the 21 was represents 75% of the cost, but it is a round number, so.
It is a round number, and that was my analysis based on what we've actually been spending this
Right.
year. So
And so optically, here's another question. So last year, 100% of the cost for household garbage, yard debris, and recycling every week was $28.75.
yeah, I'd have to go back and look at. I can pull that up right now if you'd like.
No, I got it. I think I've already got it right here. That's what our 100% fee was for all of those services. And so next year, we're proposing for household garbage, yard debris, and recycling every other week for $43.75.
Yeah, I mean, we have different contracts. And I mean, the Meridian contract is more expensive than GFL. I mean, we knew that
So-
when we adopted it.
Well, it's baked into the 28.75.
But it was only 6 months of it because we were still had 6 months of the GFL contract. So we were kind of able to split it in the middle,
And remember, GFL just honored the previous contract's rates for
Right.
a period of time, because you'll recall this conversation all started with the bids that came in and the increases that were going to be involved at that time. But those rates never went into effect. That's when we split out the.
Yeah.
This is more, they were more expensive than the previous contract.
Yes.
GFL was going up.
Yes.
Which is why we're.
Right.
So, I mean, it's almost hard to compare apples to apples when looking at last year's expenditures and
Well,
this,
you can
since it was
compare it from a
two
total
different
cost
contracts.
perspective. And this is what I was doing versus.
It was going to be substantially more.
Yes.
Like even if we hadn't changed the Meridian,
Yeah.
it was
ATM,
going to be like this.
what action would you like this morning, afternoon, whatever time it is today?
There's no formal action that has to be taken today, certainly.
This information that you'd like us just to have before next week's retreat so that we are prepared?
I think, and I'll ask Tess and Reagan to chime in, if you are having considerable doubts about adopting the 25-25, it would be helpful to know that now, because that is the number that we have used coming into retreat next week. And
Now or like tomorrow after you give us a chance to read it, this?
I think tomorrow's fine. Yeah.
I actually do have one more question, actually,
Fine.
on recycling. So I read in here that you propose to keep the fee at $10. What is our actual cost?
Our actual cost,
Like to date, anyway?
yeah, no, I need to pull that up. So right now, we are paying $19,006 a month
I know that, but I mean, like cumulatively, where are we per user from January 1?
You're in tier 4 now, so it's not so much a per user,
Yeah.
it's that you're paying for
We can do the math.
2,600 customers essentially, because it's 650 per tier.
I'm talking about actuals, like,
You talking about home per?
yes, so January's rate was different than February's
No,
rate.
it's the same, because we pay, well, I think we hit tier 4
Say
probably
if it
in
changed, it's
February,
because we
but
moved tiers in
yeah,
that month,
but-
but
Tier 4 is $19,006.
And how many
When
users?
did we hit that in January?
or
We hit-
aggregate.
We hit tier 4, that's per month. We hit tier 4
is it February?
February.
So I think we were in,
January's
month.
bill would have been different.
Basically the moment that we added customer number 1951.
So can somebody do the quick math on what we're paying divided by how many people are using it?
No, sorry, I'm answering pickup messages.
Oh,
So
just
so it's
kidding.
$9, I think it's $9.66 is our cost based on 2,000.
I mean, it could literally vary by the day. I mean, I will tell you that these recycling subscriptions are varying by the day, so.
But they're going up and going up in
Not
tier 4.
Sometimes
helps
people
us, right?
drop, I mean,
So we get a weekly.
Yeah.
report, comes out every Tuesday from Tessa staff. And it has had a huge, since mid-December, January, it has climbed up. There are some people that have opted out, and so that's a subtraction. There are some people that want 2 cans instead of 1 can. So it changed. We don't get a daily report because it changes daily, not by a great amount.
Right, but the trend line is up.
Yeah,
The trend line has been up. It is probably flattening at this point.
I mean, as of Thursday, when we had 2,000 subscribers, we were paying $9.50 per subscriber, but it's still a flat $19,006.
So 1950.
Up by 4% for these calculations, if that's the.
Recycling is also adjusted 4%.
It is.
Right, and that drops as we sell out tier 4. That per unit expense will
Per
drop.
unit, yes.
So we need to do another push on getting additional people signed up. I mean, it sounds like. Or we should.
Well, I feel like that we could also, I mean, the marketing behind it would be that we reduce the cost in order to get, because I think last year what was proposed was $7 for this recycling.
We had proposed $7.25 based on where we saw, the kind of where our median might be, and that gave us a comfort level, not knowing how many we're going to describe and what delta we might have. So,
Which may be wrong, was it the 350 was the number of people who had committed to recycling at the time? Is
no,
that
we
not
didn't
right?
start signups until October. It was purely just a best guess
was just
based
a
on
wild
this is a
guess.
new
Okay.
service.
Wow.
It's $10
It's
a
at
month.
2,000
We have
now. That's
no idea
awesome.
how many people are going to sign up.
So
So,
if we get to 2,400 people, no, 50% of the median is 835, well, plus 4%.
correct. Yeah.
This is
it's
last
the
year's
median.
numbers.
Yeah.
So as of this morning, we were at 212.
We also discussed maybe limiting signups by quarterly at some point so that we're not a constant influx. And I know we're early, and so I want to make sure that
So
we honor those.
We beat that. I think you're into some of those, because we really discussed that. The problem is that now you tie a citizen who may be coming or going, moving in. Or
Oh, yeah.
So
To a
we
quarterly.
decided to, and honestly, we can obviously change that, but we
Yeah.
decided to err on the side of the citizen.
Sounds like a good
But
choice.
what we don't do is prorate.
We don't prorate. The bill's the bill.
So-
But we let them come.
For the month, you mean? Right. If you get recycling in June, you don't pay for January to May.
Correct. Well, and also what he's saying, if you sign up later in the month and you only get one of the 2 collections, we don't go back and refund you $5.
Right,
It's
I
just
got
when
you.
you
Yeah,
start,
yeah,
it's
I get it.
$10 a
Yeah.
month.
No, that's,
When you sign up, whether you're on the A, B schedule, it just
Right.
becomes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think to your point, though, I think Chief Cameron would agree with me. We feel like the new signups have leveled off and it's manageable for us to get out in a reasonable time. So we're definitely over that
It appears
surge.
that, using these numbers from last year, every 50 people reduces the rate by 8 cents, minus 4%, the CPI number. Minus 4%.
I'm on that issue then, yeah.
So basically, in a nutshell, come to next week, you want us to be able to say, yeah, I'm good with the 75, or let's go 80, or let's go 65. Here's my
She
comfort
wants it
level.
before next week.
Do you want us to pick, even if it's not 75, a lower or higher number?
Certainly if it's going to be lower.
So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm committed to 75. There you go.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think
I'm okay with it, based on your recommendation. It's not, if we can start there. I'm not going to ask for any lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason we're, just asking for some general ideas, even at, covering 25%, it's still a $765,000 expense for us. So if you were wanting to go considerably lower, we need to find.
And that's, and the
Where is
reason
the
this is
money?
before you today,
Yeah.
if we had a sense that it was, we can't go up from $21, the difference with this addition is about $500,000 in revenue.
mean,
So
that's
it
the way
does
I feel.
impact the budget pretty significantly. And that's why we wanted to start the conversation today rather than waiting until next Thursday morning and suddenly looking for $500,000. So,
a lot of moving numbers.
In this number is the yard waste.
Yeah. mhm.
Everything else is kind of contract driven. Disposal and
Be some
collection.
variable in revenues from recycling because that's a fixed amount. Our revenues are not, but it's relatively little.
And-
So yes, it's.
and your opportunities for savings in yard waste really lie in changing the service levels, which has its own challenges because you're already kind of doing every other week. But we have tried to stay as best we can. Obviously, it's not always successful if we're having to work on a Saturday to catch up, but we've tried to stay on a regular schedule where if you're getting picked up on Thursday, it's Thursday, Friday, it's Friday. But, you start to retract back to, look, you're going to get 2 pickups a month. It'll happen when it happens.
No, I think that's what,
You start doing those, and where that is an operational challenge is we do have those subdivisions where people, due to HOA, POA rules and things, they're kind of taking it out to the curb the day they expect us to be there. But that's really, to hear, and you've already pointed it out, it's a large portion of this overall cost of the service. So it's really tweaking around the edges of the service level and stuff where your cost savings opportunities exist, but it is truly a decrease in the service level too. That's the challenge.
it's only a decrease in what day they come. It's not a decrease in the number of days that they come.
Potentially,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So,
Month,
no, I'm saying if you, like, so
Out there.
was GFL, were they also every 2 weeks?
They were subcontracting it to somebody else and it was hit or miss at best.
Whoever was before GFL, it wasn't every 2 weeks. It was around every 2 weeks. It was
You're
never like
You're right, exactly.
hard
It
and
wasn't
fast
consistent,
number.
yeah.
That was the case for many, many years, would have been waste management at the time.
Waste management, that's what it was.
And to be perfectly blunt, what occurred was, again, we have these neighborhoods that have their internal rules and their expectations, and Waste Management would go out of their way to make sure they were in there on a particular day, which then could ultimately impact anybody not in one of those neighborhoods, but it became an expectation in those neighborhoods. So that is an expectation level that we're now challenged with dealing with and overcoming and maintaining. The service level is higher right now than it has ever been, plain and simple.
I'm happy with it. The only thing is we're paying for it, right?
That's right.
And so is there any way that in like rough numbers, not today, you can figure out what overtime and Saturdays is costing in that 15?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we have $65,000 budgeted for next year in overtime.
What, 6,000 last year?
Well,
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's like,
Works out to what per account?
Let's see.
that's a market increase, y'all.
Yeah.
From 6 to 65? Incroyable. You
and
mentioned
again,
though,
the
Brenda, what I was going to
6 was an
say.
estimate based upon
Six-
what, because we started up.
The
We didn't know
6 was
what we were going to
budgeted,
get
right.
into. That's,
Right. And then what was the actual cost, Tess, for last year?
71 cents.
That's it.
We
Actual.
honestly haven't even given you all of the actual costs because there's a lot of overtime with the cart delivery and things like that. So we've,
Right.
Implementation.
yeah, we've tried to
Costs
just
that aren't going to repeat themselves in year two.
to what was really limited to yard debris. I mean, we also have, part of that is $50,000 in new trash and recycle carts. That's part of our contract. And as we add more homes, we have to buy those now.
That's in the $15
Yeah, because it's a service.
for the recycling? Is in the 15, not in the 10?
It is part of the 1.16 million that we kind of consider our expenditures.
Right.
So, yeah, I could pull that out if you wanted me to, if that would make it feel better.
So, Tess, we budgeted 6. What did it actually cost last year? Last year, we didn't have that. We didn't have the expense.
That was when we were still under contract for somebody else to do
With somebody
the
else to do
environmental- yeah,
it,
to
so we
do
didn't even do that for half the year. Oh, fiscal year. My bad. Got it. Just clicked. Thank you.
Last question I'm gonna ask about trash. Can you give me a, not today, brief breakdown of the $15, what that is? So we know 71 cents is overtime. But you don't have to figure it out now. You can email me. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the big numbers are, it's personnel, salaries, benefits. There's very small numbers in there for, they have to have phones so we can get in touch with them. There's some training and travel.
Disposal's going to be
Gasoline.
a portion of it too.
Disposal is $160,000. So, I mean, that's a huge one. There's also costs for the,
So that would be like $2, around $2.
yep.
I think if you,
The auto repair and operating, we've budgeted, recommended about $65,000. I mean, it's not insignificant for those big. Yeah. Yeah, we do have to purchase a new vehicle for that division, for the supervisor who goes and does some of this other work that the big cart or the big trucks are not doing. So that's $47,000 that's in there for the upcoming year, so.
That's to replace a truck that we had pulled out of another division to be surplused, but we went ahead and assigned it there to get the program started up. And
use the same truck.
well, it was a truck scheduled for surplus that we got one additional year out of.
Is it past its life like not working, or is it past its life like somebody else is going to use it for like the next 5 or 10 years?
We're getting rid of it. It's transmission, motor issues. It's costing us money.
Okay.
About $65,000.
Environmental Services gets a cell phone and a new truck. Like, I think I need to be in a different job. Like, it's starting to sound pretty tempting. Okay. Thank you for all of the
It's the
information.
truck that like delivers the carts and stuff like that.
I know. I think I could
So-
drive it. I think I need your job. Thank you for all this information. It's a lot. I would recommend that the council, if you all do have other things, questions on this information, try to get back to Jessica tomorrow. Okay. Is there anything else that you have on this?
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Mike.
Were we okay on a consensus of 25, 25, or 75% as far as the residential customer fee for next year? Is that a
was like,
consensus, or is that?
I saw lots of heads shaking, yeah.
You're talking about 75%.
Right.
Yeah,
I
staying
think
with
we're
what
all
we're
okay
at.
with 75%. Are we all okay with raising the rate to $25 from 21? I think was her question.
The percent reflects the rate we charge,
Right.
so that is just the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What are your thoughts?
I was asking for the breakdown of the $15 before I commit to that, so.
Okay, that's fine. Do you want to, is that something you want to discuss between now and next Thursday, or? Okay,
I can
okay,
get
that's
that
great.
To you.
Does anyone else want to be copied on that email of the breakdown?
I'm fine.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Do you want to talk about some of these other things? Yeah.
You look, okay. Ms. Gray? Okay.
Something else in the revenue forecast and discussion? This.
So we handed out a hard copy packet.
I thought we were done with it too.
this is kind of an introduction to where we're seeing some of the revenues. We're not necessarily asking you to make decisions here today, but if there's any information that you want us to collect before Thursday, or if there's any kind of immediate reactions that you have that we might need to adjust some revenue assumptions, that would be helpful to know today. So
I don't know that it's fair for you guys to deliver that and ask for us to deliver a response today.
I don't think we're
Okay.
asking for, direction.
No, it was more if there's an immediate reaction kind
Okay.
of thing. Yeah.
Right. Or if, like Councilman Goodman has asked for a breakdown of
Yep.
that yard debris. If
Is
there's,
to have some expenditure stuff out to you potentially at the end of the week ahead of next Thursday. But again, we're going to adjust potentially. Potentially, we may have to adjust some things in the draft budget if there's a revenue stream here that you just say, like, had your reply on that been, we're not raising above $21, that's just gut reaction, we got to go back and adjust for $500,000 in the budget. So it's
Okay.
that sort of thing.
right. So really we've talked about one of the three big revenue sources in terms of the environmental services fees. Our other two biggest sources are property taxes and then, of course, sales taxes. So based on these big sources and where we're seeing the other revenues coming in at, we have forecasted about $27.6 million in revenues and other financing sources. About 70% of this comes from property taxes and sales taxes, so that's significant. On the second page, we wanted to highlight some trends that we're seeing and what looks different for you from last year. One of the trends that we need to be cautious of is that our assessed property values grew, but not at the level that we have seen in past years. The largest amount of growth that we had was in Morganton Park South, our municipal service district. Outside of that, we had about 0.5% growth in assessed values. Over the past roughly 7 years, we've been seeing about 3% growth overall. So that's just something to be aware of, that when development activity slows down in the MSD in that general area, if there's not significant or notable development activity in other areas, and our assessed values stay on this trend, we might not be seeing that same 3% growth that we have in the past. And that's the first year that we've kind of seen that. So we're just seeing a number of indicators at this point that are notable and that we want to keep an eye on. Sales tax, there's some other notable things going on there too. I think you might remember that this year was the first year that we actually budgeted a little bit of a decline in revenues, and we were glad that we did, because we are tracking budget-wise to hit our budget numbers, so that is good, but we are definitely tracking to be lower than last year. We expect that by the time the year ends, we will have collected about $700,000 less than we did last year. And again, this is the first year that we've seen this in any recent history. So that's concerning, and that tells us a lot about the economy, and it tells us a lot about our consumer activity here locally.
Tells us a lot about the US Open.
It does, although we actually track it by the quarter, and not surprising, we have 3 years of data for each quarter, not surprising. June, or that quarter of 24, was the strongest of 24, 23, and 22. But when you look a little further ahead in the packet, it still didn't hit what should have been a reasonable forecast for that quarter. And those forecasts are based on actual collections from 2019. So that's a little concerning, because reasonable should have been kind of that safe budget number. We also had very strong performance last quarter, October, November, and December, which, is always true because it's the Christmas holiday. We also had Target opening, we had Home Goods opening, so we would have expected that. But again, even though that was the strongest of the 3 years, it still didn't hit what should have been a reasonable revenue forecast. So we're not here to send an alarmist message, but we share this, that we need to be very cautious in our budgeting around sales taxes, because there's always a 3-month lag. And so, we need to be tracking those and go for, probably a very conservative forecast this year. So we have modeled a conservative forecast. We use the 3-year rolling average, and so far that has served us well. We have never failed to hit our yearly forecast with that model. So we feel good about that.
So I have a quick question on that.
Of course.
So last year's actual was roughly 6.6
Mhm.
for sales tax, and you're projecting that this year we're going to have less than 6.6.
Yes.
And by
Yes.
approximately how much?
By about $700,000.
So 5.9.
5.88.
Yes. Mhm. And that is based on 6 months of actual collections, so we do have that on hand. And then 6 months of budgeted projections based on where we're seeing things. So,
It's also less than 23 and almost in line with 22.
yes, exactly.
So it's going to be 6 months of your actual collections, and then the budgeted figure, remembering that the budgeted figure was based on the 3-year rolling average. I mean, each month that passes, we'll get a better feel for where that ultimately plays out.
Yes, I mean, we'll still get a
you've
few
got it
more
up here.
months
Yeah.
of actual collections before we have to adopt the budget. So if something notable happens, we can
Adjust up or
react.
down as needed.
But this is where we're expecting. And, and this isn't new. Sales taxes are always volatile. In a really strong economy, when they're coming in strong, you feel really, really good because it looks like they're growing by gangbusters. But and I apologize, I don't have these numbered, I should have. But on this page, I actually tracked our actual revenues based and then adjusted them for inflation to constant dollars back to 2020. And that just helps to give us, we've kind of been feeling this every year, in our budget retreats. Why is it hard? Why do we feel so stretched, even though sales taxes are coming in really well? Because we can't argue with the actual dollars, but they're still not really keeping up completely with inflation. And so it just feels harder. And that's why we haven't felt like we've had that spending power that the sales taxes are bringing in. So again, we just have to make very cautious decisions because sales taxes contribute 20% of our budget. And so that's what we want you to be aware of going forward.
So are there expenses on our side that are tied to sales going down? Like
Are there-
if fewer people are shopping,
Mhm.
is there some correlation in what's needed on our part?
In terms of shopping,
I mean, maybe shopping is not the right word.
You clearly need to shop more.
Fewer people as much as just individual people are spending less on that trip, but that's.
right?
No, the baseball stuff's in my car, so I got to unlock.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure we said something. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a little bit further in there, there's some other explanation too. We get, utility sales taxes on money that's collected from electricity and things like that. And we're seeing that those are flattening out a little bit, even though we're having continued development activity. And some of that is due to more people going to solar, installing energy efficiency improvements. I mean, we've benefited from that ourselves. We've done a lot of LED upgrades in our buildings, and our library actually projects saving about $8,000 in utility costs next year just because of that improvement. So if more and more people are doing this across the town, they're paying less, utility sales taxes. So that's another one we're going to keep our eye on because it's close to $1 million in revenue. And, if that continues to stay flat or if it even starts reversing, that's important information that we need to know. In terms of property taxes, again, that's almost half of our expected revenues. We have assumed the same 29-cent tax rate that we've had for the past 2 years based on the preliminary assessment data that Moore County gave us last week. And that tax rate, we expect to collect almost $13.4 million, which is about 2% growth from last year. We've remained very strong on our collections at 99%. So we want to thank our citizens and taxpayers for that because that certainly helps there.
Can I jump in real quick on the sales tax? So I just did some quick math. If we perform at plan on sales tax for the remainder of the year at budget, that adds up to 6.35 million. So do you think the sales tax is going to perform below plan for the last
We are projecting
6 months?
$5.88 million as our expected.
Right. So I was just using the actuals to date, which is 3.4. And if I take the budget for the out months, so
We
months,
we
that
have different amounts for each month because they vary, and especially by the quarter.
no, I'm just using what is in the budget for this year. What is in our budget this year? If I just add the budget numbers up for the last 6 months. So, well, not 6 months. So that's,
But are you using a total number for all 12 months?
no, I'm using the actuals that's in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Through December.
Yeah, I didn't know what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm using the actuals through December is 3.419. And then if I just use the plan for the rest of the 6 months, not more than plan, not less than plan, that adds to 6.35.
Do you guys
There's
have-
only one Christmas a year.
I know the spreadsheet he's looking at. I did not go through that and compare it to the number you put on that slide, so that's going to be easy enough to double
Yeah.
check.
So my question is really, do you think we're going to perform below budget the last 6 months? Yeah.
We would anticipate at least one more big refund month just based on past history.
I do have a question on that.
Whether
too.
we end up below, would I be shocked with what we've been seeing if we perform below previous year? Not shocked at all. With
Right.
it being
Well,
the
this would
three-year rolling average.
This would be below last year. 6.3 is still
Yeah.
below last year.
Yeah.
It's just not 700,000 below last year.
Right.
It's 200,000 or 100,000. Anyway, just an observation, another observation. Can I ask a question about the refunds? Though, so when this refunds is part of this money is the town's refunds that we get from sales tax that we pay, correct? All right. So we earn that revenue somewhere in a sales tax report, and then it gets refunded, not just us, but nonprofits and whoever else. So for the town, it's kind of a wash. It's an in and then an out in a refund. So when that money, right? So at least on this spreadsheet, so we pay it, comes in as revenue or some percentage of it, and then we get it back. So it's reduced back out of this spreadsheet as a refund, and then that money, right? It's probably not exact, but that money, that refunded sales tax goes just into general revenue.
We never show, like, it doesn't show, when you pay the sales tax in an expenditure, like I buy this pen, it doesn't show up as an expense to finance, because we put it in a receivable and then submit at the end of the year. So you never see it as an expense and then a revenue someplace else, is that your question? Like when we pay for this pen, and then when I submit for the refund, and we receive the refund back from the state just for.
Oh, but it happens by default, right, from the county report?
The refund, it depends on when we file for it.
Do you know what I'm asking, or? Yeah, okay. What I'm saying is I know we don't recover all of it. Well, maybe we do recover all of it back, but it gets separated out by population. I get all that.
Yeah, we receive, relative to what we spend, we receive the amount we spend. Relative to the impact of refunds across the entire county and what that means to us, that gets skewed a little bit by the distribution formula.
Right, but on this spreadsheet, it's kind of an in as revenue when we spend it, right? Because it goes into sales, goes to the state. And
Right.
then- So it's in this spreadsheet, and then it comes back out through refunds
On the spreadsheet.
on the
Yes, I
spreadsheet.
think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Yes,
And then,
you're talking about a little bit, you're talking about the same thing, but two different,
yeah, I know
Documents.
brain's not working
yeah.
like yours, but but then that refund comes back into some other bucket.
Which refund are you talking about?
Sales tax refunds.
I know, but like, are you talking about through the state, or are you talking about the form that we submit to get?
That
the
one.
refund?
That one.
That's what I'm saying. So when I buy whatever we buy throughout the year, that money goes into a receivable. And when we get the money back, it's never a revenue. You don't see.
It isn't, it's not in this spreadsheet.
No.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Okay. I also wanted to just touch quickly, because it's been newsworthy, on the increased occupancy tax, which Moore County agreed to double to 6% effective January 1. That's not going to directly impact any of our revenues, but we do hope that there will be opportunities to apply for grants, is what they have outlined. We received, Southern Pines total received almost $400,000 when they did that 2 years ago. 200 of it was for Skaters for More. That is our skate park. And then we got 185,000 for the Whitehall Carriage House. So we hope that those will continue to be good opportunities to offset some expenditures. So are there any other questions on sales taxes? And of course, we'll be, ready to answer by email or in more detail next week too, as you think of things.
The only question I have is that one question that I asked.
Okay, yeah, we'll double back and confirm that number. The other revenues are fairly stable and not nearly as notable as property taxes and sales taxes. The other licenses and fees, we get the ABC revenues, we get rental tax on vehicles that are rented here. One thing we did want to point out, simply as a revenue generating opportunity, if there was the desire to increase it, is the municipal vehicle tax that we have that was implemented in FY20. It's currently a $5 tax that is applied to each vehicle that's registered in North Carolina by a person who lives in Southern Pines. The state law allows us to tax up to $30. So there is an extra $25 in $5 increments that could be added if you had any desire to do that. That is a tax that is intended to help support expenses for public streets, including resurfacing, maintenance, sidewalks, things like that. The reason we bring that up is because, as you all know, our resurfacing expenditures, sidewalks, they're all going up year by year. Right now, with our expenditures we're looking at next year, we have a gap of about $825,000 that, will have to be made up with property taxes or other revenues. So we estimate that that could bring in another $325,000 if you went up to the $30. So we just,
What page was that on?
The pink page.
yeah,
Other taxes and licenses.
files on the bottom.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
I mean, it's like I got a slinky. in
This is
my
the
hand.
$5
Got it.
raise.
It's about $65,000 a year. And it's been very, very steady. It really hasn't grown a whole lot in the 5 years that we've had it. It hasn't really dropped either. You know, we might have $1,000 here, there. So we use $65,000 in modeling that additional 325. The others are things that we really get from the state, and so we don't have the ability to influence those. Our beer and wine privilege license, very tiny, but we're already at the state maximum on that. On the next page, which is the unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, it has the picture of the solar panels there. I already touched on that one a little bit, talking about our sales taxes on utilities. Based on our actual collections that we're seeing, we're not projecting any growth there. And so, again, that's one that we want to watch. We don't have any influence on it, but we just need to be aware of what those trends are. The video programming and the alcohol excise taxes, those are all ones that also come to us from the state. So we don't impact them at all either, but relatively flat. On the next page, the blue page, these are restricted intergovernmental revenues, which means we are told what we can use those revenues for in terms of expenditures. The first one is our PAL bill, which I touched on a minute ago, and we project just over $600,000, and that all goes towards street maintenance, sidewalks, things like that. So again, our anticipated expenditures for resurfacing next year are going to be $1.3 million. So this covers less than half of that. And of course, we also have sidewalk projects and things like that. So again, that's why we just wanted to point out the municipal vehicle tax if there's a desire there. We'll be in our final year of our Fire Safer grant, which will contribute just about $380,000. We are not getting any indication from the federal government that grant or the planning grant that we have for the West Southern Pines work are impacted right now by the activities in the federal government. We also anticipate this will be the final year that we'll be doing the planning work. So
Is that part of your 3 to 5 year, or in that case, 1 year? Because that's a 380, 400,000. We're not going to fire the firemen. So we're going to have to pay that. So is that part of your like looking forward, saying, hey, next year we're going to need 400 grand more for these firefighters that have been paid for by grants?
That would absolutely become part of that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
yes. Yep, and then the last one there, just a small amount of money we get from the state for our library. Doesn't come close to covering what we provide. On the next page, these are largely inspection fees, planning fees, which I know we had a discussion about last month. The building inspection fees can vary widely from year to year, which you're seeing here. We're actually projecting a $250,000 decrease. And this really isn't something that we control. It's very much based on timing and when these applicants decide to submit their permit applications. And for example, one that we have in there this year is the Amazon facility, and those are big permits. So depending on when they come in, it can really impact revenues. So these are our projections based on projects that we're aware of right now and, just kind of historic revenues. So that's where we feel good right now. We're expecting $100,000 in the planning and zoning fees. BJ gave you an analysis last month, which I know we're still considering. We've only projected some moderate changes, very minor changes from that fee schedule. If you wanted to make some adjustments for inflation, if you wanted to make some larger wholesale adjustments, that number could probably get bumped up a little more there. And then our public works and police department, they charge some very minor fees for some of their activities. Moving on to the sales and services, the yellow page. Our biggest one here are for parks and recreation, which includes the recreation activities, and that's all the programs that people enroll in, our summer camps. It includes our athletics. We also have facility rentals in there. the most notable reason that we're showing a $15,000 decline there is we've had a pretty sizable rental of the rec center for the basketball team this spring. It was the first time they've ever come. It was notable. We took them up on it. Don't know yet if they're coming back. If they do, that would be great. But we do, I put a note in there. We do think that there is the ability, if council desired to do this, to increase some of the rental fees on our facilities. We haven't done that in several years, and we're not covering our utility costs for rentals. We're definitely not coming close to covering our janitorial services and just the general wear and tear on our buildings. So if that is something that council would be interested in looking at, we can come back with some recommendations on that as well. And then the others are much smaller revenues, or fire and police extra duty, our library money that we collect for cards that we sell and different things like that.
Fire district taxes are not set by us, though, are they?
No.
That's by the county.
Yes. So moving to fire district taxes, we're projecting about $560,000 there, and that is money that we receive to help compensate us for the services that we provide outside our corporate boundaries into what's called our fire district. So it really only covers about 10% of our total estimated expenditures.
Wait. So we received 560,000 of total estimated expenditures, not estimated expenditures in that outside of the town.
We expect to receive $560,000 from the county, and that represents about 10% of anticipated fire department expenses for next year
In
for everywhere.
everywhere. I got you. Yeah.
Is it down almost 72,000?
Let me see you answer that.
Are there fewer houses that we're taking care of outside of our town?
So that figure's not firm at this point. The reason there's a dip this year is they paid for some radio expenses that was countywide, and so there's some changes in that. That 560 has not been firmed up. I'll repeat that, and probably will not be very firm until probably June. I don't feel like it'll go less than that. I feel like it'll climb from that. Do I know that we'll make up to 71,000? Probably not.
So what I was asking a while ago, though, the fire district taxes that we receive, those are fire district taxes outside of the town limits.
That's correct.
And the number, when you said 10%, that's total, that's everything, not just outside of the town
It's
limits.
the total expenditures
Right.
for their department.
There's no way to quantify how much it costs to provide that services outside of the town limits, though, is there?
I mean, what about
No,
percentage of
There-
time?
So there is a method to the madness. It is extremely complicated. It's called the county funding formula. And it takes into account probably as close as you can to anything and everything you can the fire department spends, what it takes to run a fire department. Now, it's equal with every fire department in the county. It doesn't matter how big the department is or how small the department is. It's pretty equitable. So there is a method how they get to that number. And that's how they set the tax rate.
Is it equal or equitable?
Equitable.
Okay.
You
All right.
have a ladder truck?
Technically, yes.
Yeah.
More for the purchase of the ladder truck, not necessarily the operations of the ladder truck.
And I'm hoping, speaking of ladder trucks, that our surplus property sales will be a good bit more the year we replace our ladder truck and sell the old one. It's not we'll get more 50,000 for a over $1 million.
I would definitely
thing.
hope so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Do these numbers represent the worst possible scenario in your mind?
Conservative.
Would these numbers ever be worse than this in your dreams?
For fire district?
Right, correct.
Yeah, they could be worse, but that's a policy-driven issue at the
Okay.
county. That's public, that's what the commissioners choose to do.
Right, no, I
I
understand.
mean,
No, I
could they make a decision and us get less money? Yes.
I didn't know whether you were gonna break us with some more bad news later.
So
No,
when is the ladder truck coming?
It was ordered on December 30th of 2023. It is scheduled to be here about January of 27.
we have a
We have
party?
high hopes.
When it arrives.
We're going to have a party.
Okay.
Don't worry. We're going to have a party. We would in January 27 is probably,
For 3 years.
yeah.
No doubt.
We're hoping that is moving up a little bit quicker than that. So we would like to think maybe October or November of 26. So not a lot of difference. Yeah. I'm not proud to talk about that, to be honest with you. I'm good with when the trucks get here. I'm very happy about that, but I don't want to talk about delivery dates.
Wait for that.
So just a few other things. We've already talked a little bit about surplus, and that's really driven by kind of what we know we might be purchasing in the next year and selling, and we think there's less of that happening next year. Our leases are everything from cell tower antenna to electric vehicle charging station spots to all kinds of leases. So we also put a note there, you know, as these various leases come up for renewal or as we're negotiating with different entities, you know, there may be an opportunity there to influence that revenue there and help recover some of our costs on our facilities or infrastructure that's used. Donation and some of the miscellaneous revenues can vary widely. So
Do we have any interest at all in the former Trackside location, or is that, what's the deal with that?
we have had some preliminary, probably very vague, just calls. We are doing some code upgrades there right now, so we're not ready to lease that out to anyone. And we're also having some internal discussions on whether the best model is, you know, kind of wholly leasing it out to someone again and us having, you know, no use of it all, or whether we have some use of it like we do some of our other facilities. So we haven't decided on that yet. I think, you know, it may depend on who comes along and what opportunities.
That will be a discussion in the coming years, whether we wish to put an RFP out for that and see what the options may be. But right now, as Mike said, or Jessica, but we're looking at some code updates there, in particular, some work that needs to take place in the CSX end of the building that we had no idea had gotten as bad as it did. So there's some work going on there right now.
Yeah, all of the updates we're doing to the building are in this current budget and they're being done as we speak and should not carry forth to the next budget.
Thank you. Is there anything else on the budget introduction?
Nope, just the final page. We talk about investment earnings, and I think you all are probably aware of the current environment, so we're expecting less earnings there. Leases and Sabitas is really a GASB function. It probably doesn't mean much to any of you at all, but it's a way that TES has to record certain revenues. And we do not project any financing proceeds for next year, which would mean that we're taking on new loans or other debt. So we are hoping to fund everything with revenues kind of on hand. So that is the introduction that we wanted to give you so that you would have some idea heading into next week of the environment we're looking at, the assumptions that we've used in modeling these. And again, if you have detailed information you want, questions, we're certainly available between now and then to dive more into them.
And hopefully we'll have a draft budget
Yes.
Friday-ish.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry for cutting you off after the
Oh, no,
environmental
you're fine.
services.
We were winding down.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know that Mr. Payton has got to leave in 10 minutes. Why don't we go ahead and just take a break? Dismiss Mr. Payton.
No.
Do we need to make a motion or anything? No, we're not voting on things. Okay. Actually, we do have action items. Does it matter if we formally dismiss you?
That's fine.
Okay.
Do the actions.
Do you want me to move to,
If we can do it now, if you want to, sure.
really? Okay.
That's fine.
You got 10 minutes. Okay, all right, let's do it. All right, Appearance Commission appointment. Geraldine Crowell? Anybody good with that? Anybody not good with that? Is there discussion to be had?
And Jerry Lynn Crowell to the Appearance Commission.
Favor vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Historic District Commission, we are reappointing Ms. Edinger for her second term.
I'll move to appoint Elizabeth Ettinger to her second term.
All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Approving the budget ordinances. Tess, is there anything you want to go over, and how long is this?
Just keep going, right, Tess?
I mean, I think you said it all, we're talking about Sabinas and leases and stuff like that.
Yeah, we don't have input on that.
Yeah, she should be on the microphone.
Do you all have questions for Tess, since she is here to answer questions? Oh, you actually are, you have a presentation.
No, it's just, I thought she said she wanted me on the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
If we're going to ask her question.
They are just leases and Sabinas. It's just onboarding some new agreements that we had come in throughout the fiscal year. I didn't really want to piecemeal these. I wanted to give you like a summary of them all and just do this once. And the other one was the movement of some funds from buildings and grounds to do some work in the garage that came up that needed to be done, and recognizing some miscellaneous revenues for 2 police vehicles that had been wrecked so that we could stay within budget to purchase 2 new police
Insurance
vehicles.
proceeds from the league.
Yeah.
Page 47 and 48, for anyone in the council who's following along.
To approve budget ordinances number 3109 and 3110.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then moving on to page 49 of our agenda of our packet. The request to approve selection of audit firm for fiscal year 25. And this is something we discussed in the past, that we use the same auditing firm.
I appreciate you doing this, because I've always
Yes.
asked about it, so thank you.
I think it's important. Yeah.
Move this along, but I do want to again recognize Tess and Brooke and
Oh
her
my
staff in putting out this RFP and working through 6 of those. It's really, really scintillating reading, as you can well imagine. But feel very comfortable with their ultimate selection on this and would recommend it. You'll note, if you reviewed the memo, that the RFP went out and it was for a proposal for a 3-year period. All we're asking you to approve right now is year 1. Because again, if for some reason it doesn't go well, we can always go back and look again in year 2 or 3, but we'd prefer not to be onboarding a different auditor every year for obvious reasons of implementation and initiation.
Right.
And the auditors don't want to do that either, because the first year is going to be a huge lift for them to, look at trial balances and get our starting balances and everything on, so.
Yeah.
And that 6 proposals is a bit of a miracle.
Yes, it was
That's
surprising.
awesome. That speaks well to you and your department. So
Yeah, we were-
thank you for that.
We were excited to get them, and the proposal that is in the packet is a substantial savings versus last year.
Great.
And it's reflected in my budget that you'd be looking at next week. But it's close to a $20,000 savings for the first year.
It's big.
So,
It's big. It's good.
Approve the selection of the audit firm for FY 2025, Malden and Jenkins.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. I will make a motion to dismiss. Is that the right word? Yeah. Mr. Pate. Excuse Mr. Pate. Thank you, attorney. I know. Can I get a second? And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, if we can take a quick, let's do a 10-minute break, come back at 5:55, and we'll jump back down to item C, well, 4C.
So can I tell you one thing I was going to ask you?
Am I back now? Yes. All right, I will bring the meeting back to order. We skipped over items 4C and D, so let's jump back to council appointments. We had discussed moving some of our appointments around, specifically the treasurer position. All of us have 4 short years, some of us 2, in our council positions, and I just want to make sure that everyone has a broad range of experience in those positions. And I know that our treasurer pro tem is not the right word, treasurer-elect, treasurer assistant, okay, it's over. I don't remember what words. Vice treasurer, our vice treasurer has interest in filling the position. Are there any other changes that you all would like to make or recommend?
I'd like to be heard at
Yeah.
some point.
Okay.
Are you ready for that to happen?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. And I am interested in, so you're suggesting this change because of an assertion by Councilwoman Gray that she would like to move to that position. Is that correct?
I think that the conversation, I don't even know how it started. Back in December. I don't remember, but yes, I believe we've had that conversation.
So you think, I mean, that's the reason that you would suggest a change?
I would also like for her to have some experience. Do you serve on any committees right now or any
No,
roles?
I don't serve on any committees right now.
And you were, before you were mayor, you were assistant treasurer, right?
I was not.
I thought you were behind
was
Bill. You
assistant
were,
treasurer.
yeah, so you,
But yeah, you don't, as
Yeah.
assistant treasurer or vice treasurer, what did we decide the word was?
treasurer, yeah.
It's assistant, and it's basically the backup in
Okay.
the event the treasurer
Yes.
is out of town,
Yeah.
traveling, whatever.
But my role was none as well at that, doing that role.
Right. So you never moved into being treasurer.
Correct.
Let me mention that this is the worst time in the calendar with the budget meeting next week to shift that. Let me also mention that when I became treasurer, Bill Pate trained me. I've contacted Deborah and asked if she'd like to be trained, and she did not want to work with me. So she has not been. Let me also mention that we have the budget meeting next week. Tess is in up to her ears. Let me also mention that my name is currently on every check, and to ask to change that right now would be pretty cumbersome. It will take at least up to 10 days to change the signatures. There's a stack of checks that are going to exist right now. This is, I mean, it's fine. I would very much like to continue to be treasurer. Apparently, that is not the consensus of the group. I do need to ask you, Madam Mayor, do you have any objection to anything that I've done as treasurer?
No, you do serve another role that I believe has not been fulfilled, which would probably make more sense to move
Well, there
as
were 3 roles that I was given. One was on MPO, which you asked me to step down from so that Mr. Goodman could take over. The other one was a position in Durham that I have emailed with and called with and spoken to you about my concerns, and I cannot get a connection there at all, and you know that. And the third one was treasurer, which I have pursued and been very loyal about, and am able to do it even with a broken leg. So I just want to put that out there. So,
there needs to be a
no, I
little
want
bit-
to, I want to finish.
Please finish.
I
yeah,
want to
definitely.
finish, thank you.
I'll bring the clarity after. That's
Thank
all
you.
right.
So I think that the timing right now for Tess would be really difficult. And if you want to make a change, I would recommend that we make it either June 1 or at the end of the fiscal year, which might make sense. I would also just like to say that I feel like I'm being asked to step aside in every position that I'm able to fill, which is neither here nor there. That doesn't have anything to do with what serves Southern Pines best, which is my main concern. Right now, calendar-wise, I think it does not serve Tess or Southern Pines well to make this change immediately. If you would like it made, I would suggest either the first of the fiscal year or June 1 at the very earliest. So you all decide, and if you decide to do it in the next week, that's going to create another huge task on the part of the finance department.
Okay, so quick response, and I'll
Oh,
let you add to
I
it.
just want to make some things clear.
Okay.
Councilwoman, and I forgot your last name. just
That's
a quick-
okay. Ann's
Councilwoman
fine.
Peterson.
And words, yeah.
Texted me months ago when this discussion first began And never in any of those text messages did you ever mention the need for the town to be considered in a change of treasurer. That's one. When you contacted me about training, it was the day before you wanted me to come. Now, you know that I'm in school for my doctorate of ministry. You know that I run a school that I founded. You know that I'm a full-time pastor. I would love to have come and sat with you for, you said it takes 2 hours to do it. I've asked about that even, inquired, you know, does it take that long? But even if it took that long, I wouldn't mind sitting with you for 4 hours. But you didn't give me adequate time. You say I did not want to be trained by you. That's totally false. So this is interesting, the way that you're that you're telling these details now. But again, the main thing is you do serve on 3 other committees.
I actually don't.
Your participation is maybe not to your standard, but you are on 3 other committees. I'm
What
not
committee,
on,
I'm sorry, what committees am I on?
you know,
The one other,
one other.
but it's in Durham. I mean, and if there's a.
And I have tried desperately
be
to get in
correct.
touch with them to no avail.
I got you.
So if nobody will tell me where I'm supposed to be when, and Mr. Pate was going to send me information, and I have not seen that, and if I don't know where to report when, I cannot do it.
I believe I've been copied on some of the emails where he has forwarded things to both of us.
Okay.
And it is absolutely not out of appreciation for your service, and you have done nothing wrong as treasurer. It is purely I think that there's a lot of work to do, and I feel the burden of that work on a daily basis, and I'm happy to give roles away if there are things that you're interested in. But it's also trying to do what is right for the town and right for our council. And I think that in order for us to all sit up here and have a good understanding of the things that we're deciding, it means that we should all have experience in different positions, go to different meetings, have different roles. And if it's the right thing for the town, the only person that sits up here that has a self-proclaimed not good with numbers person is you. I mean, it's not, I'm not saying you're not good at it. I think you've done a great job, but I also think it's important to share the responsibility. And if there's another position you want, I'm happy to have that discussion. This all should have happened in December, so I understand that budget season is not ideal. Tess is not here, so I will talk to Tess directly. If you all are comfortable with making the change, we will find a time that is appropriate for Tess.
I would prefer to not make a change, but that's up to you all.
Is there another role that you would like to look at? Okay.
No.
Okay. Deborah, Brainerd, are you okay with making the change?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, I don't think it takes a vote. I think it's just, how do we do this, Reagan? Is it a vote?
It should be a vote,
Okay,
the
all right.
vote making the appointment. And if I'm hearing you say that you wish to discuss with Tess, I'm going to make the recommendation that we simply agenda this for your first meeting in April, at which time you can have an effective date worked out as to when you'd like to see that transition occur, and that way it's clean, and we just deal with it on the next business agenda, just as a recommendation.
Okay.
As I do the job, I will continue to contact Deborah, which sometimes I don't have a lot of notice because Tess calls me or texts me, and I usually respond within 48 hours of when she texts me that there's a stack of checks I need to address.
Well, I'll ask Bill again, but when I ask Bill about any training, he does not recall specific training.
I sat with Bill and went through a stack of checks.
Okay. And former Mayor Carol Haney has been treasurer. I'm sure there's.
Yes, I've
If
spoken
the
with
timing doesn't
her,
work
yeah.
out, there's people.
Any action now?
Then we will, yes, we'll move it to April's business meeting. Do you have a date for me on that?
Yes, the 8th.
Okay. All right. So we are moving this item to April 8th, and I'll give me a chance to talk to Tess about timing. All right. Moving on to planning department updates. Director Grieve, that's you.
Good evening, members of council. I just want to let you know that on your April 8th agenda, your regular meeting agenda, you will be seeing 3 conditional zoning districts, one of which is the Hunt Cliff Conditional Zoning District coming back to you. The other are 2 new ones that just came out of planning board. On April 10th, we will be having a Historic District Commission meeting. So the same project you'll see for a conditional zoning district will be coming in for a new door, because the project is in the Historic District. On April 17th, there will be a planning board meeting, and there will be another conditional zoning district, as well as some amendments that are based on Senate Bill 166 and the Watershed Protection Overlay. Those will be going to, as I said, April 17th Planning Board, and therefore they'll be coming to you in May. After that, quick update on Phase 2 of the comp plan. SB 166 and the watershed protection amendments are in fact underway. The sign code revisions are well underway. David Owens has done a review, and next Mac and I will take a look at that. So we're on target for that project. Accessory commercial units is going again. We've made some contacts with folks in West Southern Pines that we'd like to, because those accessory commercial units were for 2 areas, one of which was West Southern Pines, based on the feedback from that community. The multimodal planning grant, you remember, that's in Phase 2. The North Carolina Department of Transportation has not posted that yet, so they're behind last year's schedule by about a month and a half at this point. We email them about every 2 weeks to see if that's going to be happening, and we haven't gotten anything back. And the housing project, we already went over that earlier in this meeting. I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions or any follow-up regarding my presentation last month on fees and planning fees, please feel free to contact me and if you got anything at all. And then finally, Senate Bill 314 was introduced in this session. It is the new bill to remove the ETJ statewide in 85 counties, roughly 85 counties out of 100. It's applicable to those counties that do not have planning and zoning. And so it's out there. And so yes, if they, thank you. The 85 counties are the ones that have planning and zoning. It's the vast majority of counties. And so it would apply in those counties. It would remove extraterritorial jurisdictions in all those counties. And yeah, it's been filed and it's out there. And so, yes, we would be. So that is planning's update. I'm happy to expand on any of that, or as I said, that's just a quick round robin.
Thank you, BJ. I have not had a chance to look at the fees thing. I apologize. I mentioned that to the mayor yesterday. I'll get back on that.
I think you would like something, if we have feedback on the fees, what would you like to hear from us? Because I know it's important to budget.
I can prepare a new fee schedule based on the feedback I get from town council and submit it to management to work into the budget process like many of the other fees, if that time frame works for the town council, based on your feedback. So again, really the deliverable is, if you'd like to do anything different with planning's fees, I can work up that fee schedule. It can include things like certain applications that are going to be, cost recovery is going to be lower or higher, other types of applications.
Yeah.
If I can get some consensus, I can work that up, and then it can just go into the budget.
I have a question. It came up earlier in the general fund revenue analysis that our fees collected for development are already down. If we increase our fees, does that have any impact on, I mean, do we potentially reduce development more, reduce the income more by raising the fees? Is that too big of a question? I'm sorry.
No, it's not too big of a question, and I will attempt to answer it very, very briefly. There is a tension there. There is an inevitable tension between costs that are one of the things that make it difficult to bring housing. Application fees are a very, 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 very small portion of the overall breakdown of costs. And they do pay for a service. So the question of how much of that cost you're recovering versus not recovering. Other things, such as back and forth with engineers that chew up $100,000 worth of design, expenses. But I can't say there's some swift answer that isn't the fact that processes, application fees, these are all part of that tension between that and the just ability to go and start building houses tomorrow. And so, yeah.
Speaking of processes, in the last year and a half, we went from having 3 meetings a month down to 2, and I feel like it worked really well for our group. And I think it's worth discussing maybe the planning board not having an agenda meeting. if you have any ideas for how you could, maybe you send the agenda out to them with a overview of what's happening, like a memo, as opposed to hosting a meeting. I know that it would at least save some of our staff evening meetings and potentially reduce some of the expenses.
I could go on for 15 minutes about the pros and cons of agenda meetings, but obviously I won't. I understand your feedback. The last month, there was an agenda meeting. It was long. There were a few reasons for that. We have some new members of the planning board. Elena did update them on the housing presentation that she gave to you to keep them in the loop. So it went on a little longer. And then the agenda meeting was long, but the regular meeting wound up being shorter. But yes, staff is always interested in having less night meetings if that's a possibility. And the agenda meeting, right now, the fee analysis that I gave you does include the assumption of a planning board agenda meeting and regular meeting. So, and you may have seen that in there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a thing.
Okay, rather than having that discussion now, I would encourage the other council members that if that's something that you would be open to discussing or changing, to just let BJ know. Okay. All right.
If I could just very quickly follow up on BJ's report, is there a desire of council? He talked about the new Senate bill, ETJ, to have a resolution crafted stating opposition to it.
Yep.
I know we've already got one out there on the whole SB 382 issue, and it's simply a question because it's that time, so.
Did we draft a resolution the last time that you?
I feel like we did, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Can we draft a new one and then send them both at the same time, just as a reminder?
we certainly can do that. We'll have that crafted for your business meeting.
Okay, thanks. All right, is there anything else from planning?
No, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor.
Jumping back real quickly to council appointments, Ann, Bill has issues attending the Tri-City meetings on Tuesday that are quarterly. Why don't we put you there?
We'll talk after the meeting.
Okay. I am actually busy. I haven't seen my children in 5 days, so we won't talk after the
You
meeting.
go enjoy your children.
Thank you. All right, moving on to council roundtable. Bill wanted to request that the budget meeting start earlier. Maybe we have breakfast at the same time it's starting. He said he'd be okay with as early as 8.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
This is roundtable, and you can discuss.
Well, I mean,
8's tough for me.
Okay,
8's tough for me, but 8:30,
8:30?
let's split the difference.
we've done 8:30 in the past. I'm not sure how we ended up at 9.
And I think what happens is everybody joins and talks and does breakfast.
I just take your start time and I back it up by 90 minutes, and that's when I'm showing up to set stuff up. So that's why
We can also, people can grab breakfast and sit at the table. We can breakfast
Yeah.
and work at the same time and move things along.
So
I think.
let's say 8:30, we'll just talk as we're eating.
And I will bring my own breakfast because that's a tough thing for Beth to worry about, what to do with my dietary stuff.
Okay.
And I would love to have food from Roast this year because I went and bought my food from
already
Roast.
planned for.
Okay, great, yeah.
Oh, good.
Everybody lusted after my lunch last year, and so, great.
Something from the MPO that I swear we talked about at Reagan and that I was supposed to write down and then I forgot.
MPO.
All right, I'll think about it.
We did, well, we put forward the project we talked about last month in the way of the trail, Pinehurst Southern Pines along
No
Airport
action needed
Road,
from
but no
us.
action.
I think that's it. If something else comes up, I'll email
I
it,
think
right?
I may know what you're talking about, and we can discuss after the meeting.
Sounds
Yeah.
great. Okay. All right.
So I have a question. Does anyone on staff have the responsibility of reporting streetlights that are out?
Being out. Mike?
Anybody that notices them, we get those calls. We have police officers that will turn them in. We generally, Corey will send the notice to DOT, or not DOT, I apologize, to Duke Energy, because those are all Duke Energy streetlights that we pay lease and electricity on. But it's kind of anybody that notices them, what we need is a poll number
Yeah.
I
I think the police is probably, I don't know if they just write it down and the street where it is and give it to someone during the day
Yeah.
to actually put it in. But there's like 3 or 4 going up Pennsylvania that are out from the bridge that way, on
Okay.
this side of the road. And there's a few on Pennsylvania, and they've been out for a bit. And maybe they've been reported as just taking Duke a while to get to them. But if it's like something specifically that's be like, hey, someone who's working at night periodically should check the streets, write down the street numbers,
Yeah,
and then
and
give it to.
we've had it's interesting, so you're saying out here,
Yeah.
basically in front of us, which I know we've been trying to get a lot of those switched over to the LED, but it's a ballast issue because most all of the other streetlights around town, we have converted a number of years ago, and obviously they're not out nearly as often as they were at
Right.
one time, so, but we'll definitely have that taken a look as we've had to chase those down quite a few times.
That's it for me.
That's it. So I think your follow-up question maybe is, if you see things are out, who do you call? And when the toilet was running at the downtown park all one weekend, I called Mike, which he was really happy to hear from me. But I don't know what the answer is. I don't know who I should have called.
So I've actually done it myself. I mean, it's actually really easy to do it. You go on, just like Google streetlight out, and you just put in the pole number.
Right?
But there's like the officers are, you have to be out at night to see them, right?
Right.
And so the officers are out at night, and if they,
Maybe it's not registering, yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So, so what are you gonna do? You gonna put it in yourself, or are you gonna,
No.
consider it
We'll get it looked at.
done? Okay. Okay. Water, big picture, very long discussion I want to have about that. And the main discussion is, it circles back to a policy discussion, and the policy discussion is, there are 3 resources that are going to, and you know this, I know who you've had this discussion with. There are 3 resources in the county that are going to determine whether or not there is sprawl. And sprawl came up earlier today. One of them is going to be schools, another one's going to be traffic, and the third one's going to be water. And if we are in a discussion to sell water to the county, we are basically condoning sprawl. It was interesting to have Frank Quist here last time because he's saying that 95% of the comments at their public hearings was, let's maintain the farmland. If you're going to have development, let's have it in the cities. I don't think that there's much of a desire on the part of Pinehurst to do any more building. I think they're trying to stop development, and they take some of the water. And as to the county, I think we should have a 5 or 10-year plan about where we're going with this, and it should make sense before we just jump in and go, oh, they want water, okay, we want to sell it, okay, it might work. I think there's just a much bigger issue out there that directs the entire future of Moore County, and I think we have an enormous responsibility as the keeper of the resource. So I would like to see water put on. I would like to give more attention to water than we gave to trash, and we gave a lot of attention to trash. But I think the ramifications of water in the county of Moore and what we choose to do has an enormous impact on our fellow Moore Countyans, and we are perhaps sabotaging one of the many things that makes us an amazing place to live and our rural community. So I'm really bothered by that, and I'd like to have a big discussion about. I'd like that put on a work session, and I'd like to be able to talk about that.
I will say I am all on board with you besides the choice of language you use, but I'm happy to have that discussion and at length. Just the sabotaging and you being bothered by it. No discussion has really happened as of yet, and so I agree we have a large responsibility. I agree that we should all be heard. I'm happy to make a bigger issue of it before any decisions are made. I think it's still in the hands of attorneys right now talking about paperwork. And I don't know if there's going to be a form we can look at when we have that discussion.
It is a very loose term sheet.
Okay.
To work out between the managers and the lawyers, to have something to present to you and the commissioners to work through.
But it is a
And the
term sheet.
current status of that term sheet is what you all saw a couple of months ago. It's in the county's hands. I've heard
Right.
back from Wayne that they had some concerns around some of the ownership language, but it's sort of with Misty to get back with Mac at this point, because I can't speak to, they haven't defined those concerns and what they would be looking for instead.
But I think before we're talking about terms and contracts and lawyers and sheets, I think we should talk about whether or not we even want to participate in that. I think that's a council policy decision. And I think that the council has not been included in that, and I think we have an enormous responsibility to be thoughtful about it. So, water bothers me and wakes me up at night. I also think that a realistic look and maybe have Mr. McCune come in, because I think there have been a couple times that that resource has been threatened just for our community in 2002, and again, I think around 2008. I mean, once when you were here,
It's-
7, yeah.
I think part of the change, though, is if you move the tap down line, you actually create a better,
Resiliency.
yes, resiliency to any changes. So I mean, even if we don't partner with the county, eventually it makes sense for us to move the tap down line.
It may. I think that is great that you have reached that point, but we have not been allowed to join you on that journey, and I would like to be a part of that journey.
So just to be really clear, the county had a presentation from LKC December of 2023. So me being a party to that information is because I attend those meetings when I'm able and when it's things that are relevant to us. So I am not privy to any special discussion besides just staying in the know. And having conversations on my own with people in the community. But I'm all for having a bigger discussion. I'm all for hearing it. I think that water's a resource that withholding it from other people, it's a necessity. And so I think we need to be very careful about how we choose to, I don't know, control that resource as well. But I'm happy to have the conversation. Is there anything else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Skateboarding. I want to revisit. I'm the one who said perfection is the oppressor. Let's go ahead and make a rule. I would like to revisit and see whether or not, and I don't know jurisdictionally whether or not we can even do this, but the Welcome Center apparently is still a center of skateboarding, and I would like to talk about how to make sure that we're not at the train station. How do we make sure that we're protecting people at the train station, particularly more elderly people getting on and off the train, and visitors coming to town? I have driven by a number of times. I think the skate park's amazing. I've driven by a number of times and not seen skateboarders there, but I've also gotten calls that the skateboarders are out and summer's coming, and I'd like to, if it's possible, again, I don't know, I guess that may be a railroad jurisdictional question, but if it's possible to include that skateboarding should not happen there, that seems like the appropriate thing to do. And the second repercussion is, yeah, say it, sorry.
Go ahead, Ann, I don't want to cut you off. I thought we were saying that the downtown area, which is where the Welcome Center is, was an area that we weren't going to have.
Well, in
Did
the
we?
end.
Maybe I didn't.
In the end, yeah, I know, I need to go back and look, I need to go back and look at the ordinance, but we had younger people on the sidewalk, and then suddenly we have.
Right?
I think in the end, can we revisit
Oh,
it?
it wasn't
and-
at the
of this-
final meeting.
Yeah, I think we did. And then the other thing that's happened is somebody's almost been hit coming out of Willoughby's, and it was an older person on a skateboard on the sidewalk where they shouldn't have been.
Was the older person on the skateboard on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm
which
just making
is-
sure that it wasn't the older person almost hit by the, okay.
We can go back and take a look at that, but I thought we only exempted the block around the park. And I
Be
thought
great.
we had a discussion around the platform where the Welcome
Yeah.
Center is basically located. And I thought both of those were addressed.
You feel like that?
What was, if I may,
Yeah.
what was addressed was that the train station is essentially private property and they can be kicked off that
Right.
property. It's not a street, it's not a sidewalk, et cetera. And so what we were dealing with was merely what can or can skateboarders not, what can they do and what can they not do? What can you do with that activity or not do? And ultimately it was decided it can't be done in the historic district except for over by the park, just around the park.
And did we have?
And on the roads,
On the
yeah.
roads, which is fine. Yeah, I'm fine with that. So if somebody's coming down the sidewalk, comes by Willoughby's where it's truly just an alcove and a customer comes out of that and almost gets knocked out.
That's not allowed.
So that's not allowed. And maybe this is as simple as not rewriting. I mean, the mandate may cover all the situations. So maybe it's just as simple as calling William Dean and saying, hey, can we review with the community what shouldn't happen before somebody gets seriously injured. And I need to say that at Willoughby's, when I talked to them about it, they were so complimentary of Mason, who had been by. Mason had been by and had talked to them and had really checked in. So I think that the town staff did a fabulous job as far as trying to guide us on that. But I'm a little bit concerned about skateboarding because we've almost had a disaster. Number 3 issue I have is, can we please talk about the trees in Knollwood that we're talking about? There are towns that have sewer lines that are intact and have trees, and I'm just, the war on trees is really bothering me. Those are longleaf pines that we're talking about clearing potentially half of them out of Knollwood. And there's got to be a better way to address it. There's got to be a way to go after that. That's not a 20-foot wide clearance. I mean, we're gonna wipe out just a beautiful neighborhood full of longleaf pine. And while I honor the fact that we've got to protect our infrastructure, I also think there's got to be a way to make this happen. So that I'm really concerned about that, and I'm concerned about the fact that nobody's being real forthcoming with, oh, well, we're not really going to take out all the trees that are marked, but we might. And the trust level out there in the community is not real high. I've talked about the yard debris issue. That was something that I'm really concerned about and I'm concerned about the fact that folks on the truck are taking some pretty nasty abuse from residents, saying, you will, I hate that I hate the way they're being talked to. I hate the way they're being spoken to. I feel like I wish landscapers would do what they need to do. I think we need to really support our folks that are doing a great job on that yard debris services. And the last thing I want to say is I am catching up with you guys I appreciate being able to go and see my amazing mentee at the Boys and Girls Club give her speech, which was amazing. She did such a great job. So kudos to Isabella Beverly, who did not win, but did win everyone's heart. And in regard to Hunt Cliff, I saw that you had continued that, so I'll plan to step back into being and participating. I think it's the practice as far as the council goes, as long as I've watched the tape and what happened up to that point. So I'll plan to be a part of that discussion unless you have an objection.
No.
Okay, that's it. That's my list.
Okay. Ms. Gray?
I realize that Trinity AME Zion Church is, well, they've already been approved actually for her historical grant. And I know when we're getting off of one, the arrow points to downtown Southern Pines for historical district. And I'm wondering, is there a way that we can include the other side?
Yeah, there was some
Because
grant
of
money
the-
for signage in West Southern Pines at some point. Do you remember this?
Grant money
I thought there
for
was,
signage?
yeah, I'll have to go back through my notes. I swear it was specific to signage.
We made a budget request one year for some historical signage in West Southern Pines, but it didn't move
Yeah, it
forward.
wasn't funded.
Okay.
And I think we talked about potentially revisiting that once this grant went through and the work was done, and if it was moved forward with some sort of historic district or something, because I think that was part of the question of the grant. BJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was
You are
it was
correct.
not funded,
Yep.
but if all of that work were to eventually create some sort of small district or something, signage could be revisited at that point.
That makes sense.
Together and dealt with character and how
Yeah.
you would preserve residential character. The only way to do that would be a historical district, but that's a whole different animal. But a historical district and a discussion about that could be related to signage. And so, yeah, there was.
Yeah.
State beautiful metal, which would be great, the historic signs that the state produces for sites that you file to, I know somebody did one in Chapel Hill, and you file to obtain one, it'd be cool. That's what we should do, I think, for that. That's a great idea.
The only thing, Trinity is my home church, it's the
Yeah.
church that I joined, but I pastor Love Grove down in West End. But Paul Murphy is still a good friend. They were approved for the grant for Trinity being historic site. Our present federal administration, that's all I can say, somehow or another almost canceled the grant, it looked like, and then realized that that couldn't work, so it was reinstated. So there's some other piece of something. It's interesting because they had people come to Trinity to speak to the trustees and the rest of the members about what they were going to do in terms of what we're going to take care of first and da-da-da-da-da. And then our current president did whatever, and then everything got stopped. So I would have to check back with Paul Murphy and just see where they are at this point, based on politics and whatnot. So, yeah, as far as I know,
That
they
it's,
were
it's
approved.
a very important historical site, and we should try to get it one of the state historical markers for that. That'd be great. That's a way to deal with it without declaring the whole district to be historic district, which is a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
So that'd be cool. I like it.
That's all
Anything
for
else? All right. There's nothing for me. Reagan, anything else that you need to include before we?
No, nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. We are going to go into closed session. I will ask anyone from the public who is here to step out. After our closed session, we will not have any, action. So if you are on YouTube, the feed will close, and at the end of our closed session, we'll just adjourn the meeting. Thank you for all who were here.
I would request a motion then to go into closed session under the NCGS listed on your agenda, and I would also request that the town attorney be included in that work session.
I make a motion that we move to closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A6, and that the town attorney be included in that closed session.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will keep notes.